We'll start in just a minute. Good morning and welcome to the November 17th meeting of the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors. Before we begin our meeting, would you please join us in a moment of silence to honor the victims in the Paris attacks over the weekend? And we have the French flag flying this morning in their honor. Thank you. Now we will have the American Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Supervisor Pine?
Here.
Supervisor Horsley?
Here.
Supervisor Slocum?
Here.
Supervisor Ticia?
Here.
President Groom?
Present. Thank you. Public comment. I have one speaker card from Martin Fox.
Good morning, President Groom, members of the board, my fellow veterans, Supervisor Slocum and Mr. Maltby, and County Council Mr. Byers. Thank all of you for your service to the county. Thank you for compassionately granting persons living with serious mental illness who lack the insight needed to seek treatment voluntarily access to the effective and efficient mental health care that assisted outpatient treatment, known as Lora's Law, provides. No one volunteers to become mentally ill. Mental illness is a brain disease that indiscriminately strikes its victims without warning. Untreated mental illness makes a person's family, friends, and the community collateral damage in its wake. Please bring Assembly Bill 1194 to the attention of all mental health treatment providers and first responders because it is a potential gateway to treatment for persons experiencing a mental health crisis. The governor signed Assembly Bill 1194 last month, calling on mental health professionals and peace officers to consider whether the historical course of a person's mental disorder is evidence that supports placing them on a 72-hour hold for an assessment, without regard to whether the person presents an imminent or immediate danger to themselves or others. In other words, the intellectually and morally bankrupt legal sophistry, which used to insert the adjectives imminent or immediate before the word danger when considering whether to place a person on a 72-hour hold, has always been a misrepresentation of law. Persons living with mental illness who lack the insight needed to seek treatment voluntarily no longer need to become dangerous to themselves or others before being provided with treatment that will lead to their recovery. For all these reasons, please bring Assembly Bill 1194 to the attention of all mental health treatment providers and first responders because of its potential gateway effect to treatment for persons experiencing a mental health crisis. Thank you again for voting to provide Lora's Law assisted outpatient treatment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. That's the last speaker we have for public comment. So now I'd like to take action to set the agenda and to approve the consent agenda items.
I'll move to set the agenda and to approve the consent agenda items.
Second.
I need to abstain on item number 30. Other than that, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. So the consent calendar has been approved and the agenda has been set. And we'll now go to the item number 1, which is a resolution to accept the 2016 San Mateo County Exposition and Fair Association budget presented by the San Mateo County Event Center. Good morning.
Good morning. Chris Carpenter, Senior Vice President and General Manager, San Mateo County Event Center. Hard to believe we're here for our 13th year for our budget. Time's going by fast when you have fun. But good morning, Madam President Groom and all honorable San Mateo County Board of Supervisors. And thank you for your guidance, vision, and support in the operations of the San Mateo County Event Center and all the DBAs that we operate underneath that. I'd like to thank our San Mateo County Exposition Board Association Board Directors for their hard work, assistance, and vision in formulating this 2016 budget. In addition to all the San Mateo County Event Center managers, especially Tim Smith, our CEO, who runs the finance department, and then Dana Storr, who is back with us after a 2-year hiatus and moving to another facility to get their operations going. So it's a pleasure to have Dana back, and she'll be very much involved in the fair this year, so we're very happy to have her return to the operations. Also thanks to County Manager Mr. Maltby, Mr. Byers, and your team for the legal advice that you've given us over the years. Joining me today, was going to join us today was Jonathan Gervais, our president, who was unable to join us because of another function that came up this morning. So this morning, again, we have Dana, Tim, and myself. I just wanted to touch on some highlights. First of all, 2015 is turning out to be forecasting to be a good year for us. I think we're ending up at about 17.8% reserves. We always want to maintain that at 15% just in case we have any unforeseen emergencies. Just touch on the fact that we've had many capital projects over the years, going back to 2009. It's almost $7 million. I won't go back to some of them. One of the largest ones, as you know, was the Jockey Club at $5.4 million, and Tim will talk a little bit about it, but we only owe $300,000 on that yet. So in 3 years, that total debt will be paid off on the Jockey Club. We finished some major projects recently. The HVAC system for about $860,000 on top of Expo Hall is done and has been completed for about a month and a half. Very high efficient, and can be operated on a computer from 140 miles away. So it's a very high efficient system for us. We just finished literally 2 weeks ago installing new LED lights, 286 LED lights in Expo Hall. And that just names a few. So we're working toward those goals. By the way, those lights, after the cost, we received a rebate from PG&E on those lights, and the payback will be about 4.38 years. So very good project for us. In addition to the fact that we've completed a sustainability team. So we're keeping a close eye on electrical usage beginning now, water usage, and created a sustainability team and went through a RevGen sustainability program that was about 6 months. So we're paying very much attention to that. Good fair. Attendance was about flat, but revenues in every area were up for this last year. We feel that we're going to do very well in 2016. In the infinite wisdom of the California Racing Board, they changed racing dates, so we do overlap with Alameda, but we don't think that that's going to harm us because of the distance between the two fairs. But Dana has some exciting projects coming up for the fair in 2016. Again, I think I'll turn it over to Tim at this point, but I truly want to thank you for your vision, your guidance, and your support. And it's been a pleasure in working with you on a lot of the events we've done, the emergency preparedness event, the job hunters event that we have done. So again, I thank you for this consideration, and we respectfully ask you for your approval of this budget, and I'll turn it over to Tim to do a PowerPoint and kind of touch on the high points.
Good morning. Thank you. And just to segue into what Mr. Carpenter had indicated, what you have in front of you is a quick analysis of 2012 through 16. The left-hand columns show our major revenue indicators. And as you know, we have facility income. Those are the building rentals and all of the rental of equipment that would go along with an event. Food and beverage, as you know, we started bringing it in-house in 2014. Jockey Club, those revenues are all the satellite wagering facilities and commissions and track commissions that we receive. The fair, as Chris mentioned, all of the fair revenues. Going into 16, we decided to separate parking and RV revenues that had currently been included in facilities to give a better trend analysis of how each of those areas are performing. And then down below, you can see our major costs analysis of cost of sales, payroll and related, supplies, advertising, promotions, and on down to your gross operating profit. But as you can see, looking at 2012 through 16, We're continuing to see a fairly steady increase in revenues. We're projecting just over 7% growth in 16 over our outlook projections for 15, and managing costs as it goes down to our gross operating profit of about 10% ahead of 15 outlook. That gross operating profit is primarily our cash flow that we pay our debt service from that Chris alluded to earlier, along with any special projects that may occur, capital, leasehold improvements, or furniture and equipment. The next slide gives us a little different outlook, if you will, of our numbers. You can see our revenues line continues to grow, and our gross operating profit in 14 and 15 and beyond is maintaining as well. And as Chris mentioned as well, our biggest concern is having adequate reserves for unforeseen capital improvements or any leasehold improvements. And like we mentioned, we've put in approximately $7 million in capital improvements and leasehold improvements over the past several years, and just finishing up the roof, lighting, and air conditioning systems in Expo. So with that, staff will be happy to answer any questions, but we're very pleased about the positive trend that continues to occur. And thank you.
No, I just want to highlight also, Chris mentioned Disaster Preparedness Day, but we just had seniors on the move there last week, and it was quite a success, and they did a tremendous job for us, so thank you for that as well. The other thing I found interesting that you had in the report here is that our Jockey Club is still the most successful satellite wagering facility in California. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we're very pleased. Even though we project a decline, we're above that decline, just because of the state of California horse racing. But we continue to be the top in the industry. I'm a board member now on the California Authority of Racing Fairs, and we used to do conferences, and we're going to get back to doing those conferences on a bi-yearly basis. I think they're good, and we learn from each other, and one of our challenges is to get younger folks in there to get them used to the Jockey Club. But thank you. Yeah, we're proud of the fact that that's still operating very well.
Thanks for your report. I'd be curious to hear an update on your thinking about deploying solar panels on your site. As you may be aware, we're in the middle of a new initiative here called Peninsula Clean Energy to try to bring more renewable power to our businesses and residents. And in time, we hope to partner with or catalyze local production of solar energy. So I know you've looked at this a little bit in the past, and I don't know if you've given any more thought over the last number of months. But
we definitely have, and like I say, I signed up for a REV sustainability program, and it was a 6-month program, and they helped us put together initiatives. So our initiatives list is done. We have a PowerPoint. In terms of solar, they have now put me in touch with, I haven't contacted this individual yet, but they put me in touch with an individual that I may have a phone call with, bring him out with a meeting, or for a meeting rather. We're not, at the present time, to my knowledge, unless it's changed, eligible for any rebates. So the cost, if we look at one of the larger buildings, for example, Expo Hall, would be pretty exorbitant, as I recall, about $1.4 million. So what we want to do, and I need to talk to the board about it more, and the board continues to talk about it. I would say every other board meeting we talk about it. But now that we're done with our initiative plan, I think my recommendation would be that we start small. We may start on our office building roof space. We may start on the top of the Jockey Club or the Cypress Hall, which are both 16,000 square foot spaces. But we're very much interested in following through with that. Now, the California Fair Services Authority used to have another authority, the California Construction Authority, that was very much involved in that. They dissolved it for a year, but now they're bringing it back on board. And they still have many photovoltaic systems that they purchased a while back that still may be viable for use. So we're going to be talking to them soon. So yeah, it's Mr. Pinus, Councilman Pinus, definitely on our radar.
well, fortunately, my colleague Supervisor Groom is helping lead the effort on Peninsula Clean Energy. So, we'll just see what opportunity might come up.
Okay, great.
Anything else? About a motion to accept the resolution?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
Dana. Now we'll go to item number 3. Introduction of an ordinance repealing and replacing Title V of the San Mateo County Ordinance increasing annual device registration fees for commercial weighing and measuring devices.
Good morning, members of the board and Honorable President Groom, County Manager Maltby, and Council Byers. I'm Fred Crowder, the County Sealer of Weights and Measures. Usually I'm here in the role as Agricultural Commissioner, but today this is the other hat that I wear, which is the Weights and Measures. This item is the first reading of a proposed ordinance to increase the device registration fees for certain weights and measure devices that are not already at the maximum allowed by state law. These devices are used for commercial transactions, and these additional funds will allow our staff to be able to continue to test them, be sure that they're accurate and that they're correct, and to protect both the industry and the consumer. The maximum fee that we can charge is set in state code, and as mentioned in the letter that you have, are not at the increase, and that'll supplement the $388,000 that we're presently receiving in revenue against expenditures of estimated $468,000. So these funds have already been accounted for in this year's budget and next year's budget, so no budget adjustments are necessary. And a letter was sent to the affected industry on November 5th. So in the second reading and adoption of it is scheduled for the December 8 meeting of your board. So I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Questions?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thanks, Mr. Crowder.
Thank you very much.
Go to item number 4, which is public hearing to consider an appeal of a planning commission design approval. Mr. Monowitz, good morning.
Good morning, President Groom, members of the board, Mr. Maltby, Mr. Byers. Item number 4 is an appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of a new single-family residence on Cordilleras Road in the Emerald Lake Hills Design Review District. And a quick correction to the project description shown in this slide, which states that it involves the removal of 4 significant trees. The project has been revised to save 2 of those trees, so it now currently involves the removal of 2 significant trees. This slide shows an aerial photograph of the project site on the south side of Cordilleras Road. You can see that it's heavily vegetated. It's also fairly steeply sloped. This shows the project site in relationship to the appellant's properties. One thing to note about this slide is you can see that the applicant's property is significantly narrower than the appellant's properties, which limits design options to a certain degree for the applicant. Here's a photo of the project site to the right and one of the appellant's residents to the left. And here's the project site, again shown by a star with the other appellant's residence shown to the right. There's 3 standards of review that are raised by the appellants. Let me say, actually, that there's 3 standards of review that apply to the project. It's compliance with zoning regulations, compliance with design review requirements, and compliance with the grading regulations. With regard to the design review standards, there's 3 main issues raised by the appellants. Tree removal, alteration of topography, and respecting the privacy of the neighbors. So first I'll talk about tree removal. This slide shows the trees that will be removed in green, the trees that will remain in yellow and in red. First, let me talk about the tree on the top shown in red. That was originally proposed for removal but will now be retained, and that is in conjunction with the applicant's agreement to remove the previously proposed retaining wall in that area. So where you see the blue X, the applicant had originally proposed to install a retaining wall. That is no longer a part of the project. The two trees shown in yellow are of concerns to the appellants due to the proximity of the retaining walls. And I'd like to refer the board to condition number 3, which was added by the Planning Commission and requires that these retaining walls be moved as far away from those trees as possible to minimize disturbance to the roots. It also provides, or I should state, requires replacement of these trees should construction of the retaining walls result in their eventual demise. So as I noted, tree removal has been reduced. As originally proposed, the project involved the removal of 3 significant trees, and it's been reduced to 2. I noted the civil plans will be revised so that the retaining walls will be located further away from the 2 coast live oaks, and the arborist recommendations are required as conditions of approval, and those recommendations really seek to ensure that during the construction of the retaining walls that damage to the roots of the trees will be minimized. This slide shows modifications that have been made to the project to reduce the impacts on the trees, which I previously described. Moving on to the second design review issue, that relates to the alteration of the natural topography, and the issue raised by the appellant is really about the extent of grading at the rear of the property, and the conditions of approval require that that grading be kept to a minimum, and as shown by this slide, we are prohibiting grading in the rear portion of the property. So the third issue has to deal with neighbor privacy, and these bullets identify the methods by which the applicant has attempted to address these concerns. The house has been lowered by 1 foot. The window size, shape, and location have been modified, and I'll have a slide to show that. They've done their best to try and preserve the trees that are on the site. There will be a tree replacement plan, and it's worth noting that the Thompson property does have a privacy wall, which will minimize the impact of the project on their privacy. So in this slide, we've highlighted the changes that have been made to the project to try and protect the privacy of the adjacent residents. And in summary, it involves diminishing the size of the windows and providing frosting on some of the windows where there potentially could be a view into the neighboring property. So staff and the Planning Commission concluded that the project conforms to tree protection requirements, and as noted by staff and the Planning Commission, the tree removal, some tree removal is necessary due to the constraints of the site. And in addition, the modifications offered by the applicant have, we believe, addressed tree protection requirements in the county's regulations. We also believe that the grading proposed by the project is the minimum necessary to implement the project consistent with grading regulations. And we believe that the project's design, as modified by the applicant, meets the requirement of the regulations to respect the privacy of the neighbors. So before I get to the conclusion here, I'd like to address 4 points that were raised in a letter that you received from the appellant. The first point is that they've requested that the second story be reduced by an additional foot. Staff believes that this change is unnecessary to meet the privacy standard in the county's regulations. The second point is they have requested that the house be centered on the property so that 10-foot setbacks are provided on each side as opposed to 12.5 and 7.5. We don't recommend this change because it will result in an increase in the amount of tree removal. The appellant has requested that the replacement trees consist of coast live oaks, and I'd like to bring your attention to a memo that was distributed this morning from myself regarding a recommended revision to Condition 6. It essentially supplements the tree replacement plan to provide additional details regarding replacement requirements. It requires a minimum of 4 15-gallon size replacement trees, 2 of which must be planted on each side setback in locations that provide maximum privacy screening. And it also requires that the replacement trees be indigenous evergreen trees. Previously, the applicant had proposed deciduous trees, which would only provide screening during the spring and summer. So we believe evergreen trees will do a better job of protecting privacy. So with that, we believe that the project is consistent with the county's requirements. It's exempt from CEQA, and we recommend approval as condition. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Questions for Mr. Monowitz?
I have
Supervisor
a couple
Tissier.
of questions. First off, on this new item that we received, that's item number 6, the condition that's been changed. It says in the event that the replacement trees do not survive, the property owner should submit. What's the time frame for that? I mean, it could be a year later and they don't survive. It could be 2 years later they don't survive. What's the guarantee that they will be replaced should the trees not survive?
The time frame is essentially for the life of the project. So in the event that we become informed that the trees have not survived, then the applicant will be responsible for immediately submitting a replacement plan.
Okay. I also had a question on the first submittal. The applicant had asked that the second-story floor be lowered. And then it changed. Why did that change?
I think I would ask the planner, Erica Adams, to provide the details there. But as I understand the issue, it has to do with the overall plate height of the structure. And so while the applicant had lowered the structure 1 foot, the appellant has requested an additional foot, and we are concerned that lowering it additional 1 foot will both increase grading and lead to potential drainage problems into the garage. Now, in response to that, the appellant has said we're not asking for the garage floor to be lowered one, but just the second story. And my understanding is that the project design includes standard 8-foot ceilings, so to ask them to go down to 7-foot ceilings would be an unreasonable requirement.
If you didn't include the garage portion, that
Yes,
finish,
that's correct.
Would that still make it 7 feet, or would
That's
that?
correct.
Okay. All right. Let me see. The other thing that, go ahead.
I'm going to ask Erica to supplement that response.
You can also clarify with the applicant, but there were some.
Did you state your name for the record?
I'm sorry,
please?
Erica Adams, planner for the project. There were initially, when the project was submitted, several revisions that had to happen with errors with civil plans, and I believe that the height differential was something that was first modified when we found some errors in the civil plans, and then the later 1 foot was as Steve described. This was a concession, the 1 foot adjustment, but the original plans had errors that didn't represent the site quite correctly, and so that's where that change happened.
I had one more question. This sort of surprised me. In item number 4 on the appellant's letter, they talk about the fact that they're being required to only provide a chain link fence on the property. Is that unusual? That seems unusual to me.
Yes. Generally speaking, the Planning and Building Department reviews the development proposed by an applicant, and we make a determination as to whether that proposal conforms to our regulations. In this case, to my knowledge, there is not a new fence proposed, and generally speaking, we don't require a property owner to install a fence in conjunction with their project. That's essentially a neighbor negotiation. Typically, fences on property lines are negotiated and the costs are shared between neighbors. So it's the department's perspective that it would be unusual for us to require the applicant in this case to bear the full cost of installing the fences in conjunction with their project.
Okay, well, I mean, that may be something that they can talk about, but if you ask me, when it says respect privacy as much as possible, a chain link fence to me doesn't really respect privacy as much as possible. So maybe that's something that can be looked at and perhaps resolved between the two of them, but that does concern me a bit, as well as making sure that the time frame for the life of the trees is the life of the project, to me is appropriate. I mean, to the life of the land. Go ahead.
Supervisor Horsley?
As I understand it, the original proposal actually did talk about removing the trees that we are now trying to make sure that they will survive, and that's the real reason for having a 7.5-foot setback as opposed to the 10-foot. So what are these, heritage trees or something, or?
They are significant trees. Let me go back to the slide that
They may or may not survive anyway?
We believe that with the arborist recommendations, they are likely to survive. We are trying to be responsive to the concern that they may not, and so we've therefore placed a condition to address the possibility that they become damaged during construction and need to be replaced. The two trees in yellow at the bottom of the property are coast live oaks. The tree in red at the top is a buckeye, and there's actually two buckeye trees near that retaining wall. Now, the appellants have argued that preservation of those buckeye trees really aren't adequate to protect privacy because buckeyes are another type of deciduous trees. But nevertheless, because they are there and because they are an important part of the existing site's vegetation being native trees, we feel it is appropriate to preserve them.
So we're trying to preserve a buckeye tree?
Two buckeye trees on the top side and then two coast live oaks on the bottom side.
So it's hard to tell in this diagram. Which is the 7.5-foot setback? Is it the top one with the red?
That's correct.
I mean, I find buckeye such a, well, it's not my favorite tree necessarily because it.
Perhaps I can clarify that in that if the house was to be centered on the property, it would push it down lower, closer to the two live oaks on the bottom.
Oh.
So that's the reason why we're not recommending that it be centered, because we believe that that will then increase the potential that those coast live oaks will be damaged.
Was it our requirement that they protect those trees, or is that something that came after? Because as I understand it, they originally were proposed to remove those trees.
Yes, our requirements seek to protect existing trees to the extent feasible. So, yes, we have placed requirements on the project in an attempt to do so.
I had a question in this topic as well.
Are you finished, Supervisor?
Yeah, I'm finished.
Okay. Supervisor Pine?
Supervisor Horsley covered most of it, but I want to get a better sense for how much privacy is gained by centering the house.
I believe that it simply is a matter of distance between the homes, so it's a matter of 2.5 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the relationship to how that will affect the survival of trees on the property, which I think we've already covered.
And then my second question, in the appellant's letter, they cite this Hort science report. And their characterization is that these trees are unlikely to survive. And what is your reaction to this description of the Hort Science Report?
It's not unusual that we have differences of opinion between two arborists in that regard. It's the department's feeling that with the implementation of the measures recommended by the project arborists that we will be protecting those trees.
Okay. Thank you.
Quick question, Mr. Monowitz. There's no page number, but there's a chart in the staff report that has trees on the subject property, and it was done by arborist Kevin Kelty, maybe?
Right.
Just curious, when it said most of the trees are listed as fair vigor with poor form, what does fair vigor mean?
I think that has to do with its overall health, how quickly it's growing, how its overall appearance and healthiness is viewed by the arborist. So I would imagine that a tree that had better than fair vigor would be one that was growing rapidly and really showing signs of very good health. Whereas in this case, I don't believe that the arborist felt that the trees on the site were really prime specimens, if you will.
In fact, there's only one, the Grecian laurel. I'm not familiar with that. But that's the only tree where the arborist says it's good vigor.
Mm-hmm. Yes, laurel trees seem to do pretty well in our climate, so I'm not quite surprised at that.
Thank you.
I'd point out that Supervisor Horsley is probably robust vigor.
No. But I would recommend you send it to the House.
Supervisor Tissier?
Well, I guess if part of the reason for not centering the house is to save the trees, but all the trees are poor vigor or fair vigor with only one good, and they all seem to have poor form for the most part. I'm not following that balance there.
Understandably. So the appellant has suggested that in conjunction with centering the house that we recognize the potential that the trees on the side that will have now a 10-foot rather than 12.5-foot setback will be lost. And they have suggested that we allow that to occur and that we replace those lost trees with coast live oaks. So that is certainly a condition we could place on the project should that be the desire of the board.
Personally, I think that's preferable.
I think the applicant probably has a response to that, so may I suggest that we...
Yes, we have a number of cards. We have no cards from the appellant. Is that correct? Okay. Okay. Besides which presentation? All right. Okay. I don't have a card from any of you all. So we'll hear from the applicant. We'll hear from the applicant first and then the appellant. Okay. Mr. Zemay? How much time would you like?
15 to 20 minutes would be fine.
15.
Please.
15.
Supervisors, thank you for being here. Today I'm speaking on behalf of myself and Ryan Karsich. We are the both co-owners of 2029 Cordilleras. Before I jump into this, give a little background about myself. I'm born and raised here in Redwood City, went to Clifford School, Sequoia High School, class of 2011, currently pursuing a construction management degree at Sacramento State, wrapping up my last year there. Ryan, who's going to be the end user of this home, he's the owner of the Energy House in San Carlos. He's a local business owner. Looking to raise a family, and for two young guys, it's kind of hard to find affordability in the Bay Area. So we teamed up to find a property that we could both benefit from. Agenda we're going to talk about. I just want to go over three main points: the timeline from when we started this project over a year ago to basically today, and then the conditions that kind of clarify. There's some conditions that were not very clear, so I was going to clarify those. and then compliance with the design review standards. So on 7/31/14, we purchased the property. We looked around for fixer-uppers. We looked for vacant property. We found this one. It was what we could afford at the time. So we made an offer. We got the property. Then we moved into designing a home. So we hired a designer, and we submitted drawings. At that time, they're design drawings. They're more schematic than design, really. So they're not perfect. So at that time, there was about 3 or 4 revisions that were made, going back and forth from comments from Erica Adams, but then also letters coming from Peter Ingram and Seth Thompson that had concerns also regarding tree protection of those trees along the property line. So we were responding to those, going back and forth. Finally, on 3/24/15, we had the application deemed complete, where we were able to move into design review. At the design review meeting, we had tons of neighbors show up. We kind of just gave a spiel about the property, explained who we were, and it was approved. So at that meeting, we heard tons of concerns from the neighbors, from Seth Thompson, Peter Ingram, and also people from the greater Emerald Hills. Their concern was tree protection, privacy, all the things that we're trying to address in these changes that Steve was talking about. Design review was appealed on 5/3 on the last day of the appeal day, of course. And then we moved into neighbor meetings where we met with, at that time, the neighbors hired an attorney. So we met with their attorney at their office, and we were going to this meeting to think that we were coming in to have things proposed to us, changes that would help the project move forward and have the appeal revoked. That wasn't the case. It was kind of just me just giving concessions, and not really a good response from the neighbors. So we had another meeting. We met on the site. At this meeting, the neighbors were able to actually basically pull measurements off the property line to see where walls would be relative to their homes, trees, things like that. And at that meeting, Seth Thompson made it adamant that he wanted to keep the buckeye tree on the left side of the property. So we made that change to keep the buckeye. So, and in addition to that, it was, again, finished floor elevations concern. It was tree protection. All the trees on the property be protected. So what do? We're trying to protect these trees. Neighborhood, and then going next, the Planning Commission denied the appeal on 8/26. At this meeting, before we went to this meeting, we put concessions on the table before we went into the meeting. So I was going to implement these changes regardless of them revoking the appeal, just as a courtesy, being a good neighbor, right? So then the Planning Commission implemented a lot of these changes, and I think that most of them were the real pertinent ones were actually implemented into the project. Lowering the floor, planting additional trees, things like that. It was appealed again, and now we're here today. And the neighbors proposed new conditions on 11/6, about 10 days ago, prior to this meeting, to revoke the appeal for today. Just not enough time to really hash it out. So, and a few of the conditions were just not reasonable. So, back up. And so here we have the neighbors' basis of appeal. So they want an additional foot lowered on the house. We already lowered it 1 foot right at the Planning Commission meeting. And at that meeting, Peter had a diagram showing basically an elevation of how if you're standing on the deck of our house, your 1 foot of someone's head, a 6-foot person, would be looking over his privacy wall. So we lowered the house to address that concern, and they want an additional foot. So moving on to removing and replacing trees 6, 8, and 9, 6, 8, 9, and 10. The whole time that we've been going back and forth with these conversations with them, all we've been hearing is tree protection. Save the trees. And we also want to save the trees. And now they want, in this new proposal, they want to remove all the trees. So it's a little contradictory. So now we're going to center the house, and they want to replace the trees on that side of the property, and then they want to install a 6-foot-high fence. And in terms of that, they can hash that between Ryan, who's going to be the end user, and neighbors, like Steve was saying. Additional privacy. So Like I said, this is a depiction showing what we lowered it to and how if you're standing on a deck as a 6-foot person, you could not see over the privacy wall in the upper right-hand corner. And then just another picture showing the wall at the front of the property. Plant vegetation at window. The only window that really has a sight line into Peter's backyard is the kitchen window. And whether we plant a redbud tree, an evergreen, whatever tree we want, I'll let the neighbors pick what they want. We'll plant something in front of that window to block that sight line. Additional privacy on Seth's side. This is the tree that he asked us to save. So what do? We deleted the retaining wall. We pulled it into the house, and now it's incorporated into the house. And we're going to try to save those trees, that cluster of trees.
Excuse me. The picture in the lower right with the looks like a yellow tape tied around the tree. That's the tree that you're talking about.
That's the tree. And then tree protection. These are the two oak trees that are closest to retaining walls. So what I did here is I laid this out. It's probably plus or minus a foot, or plus or minus 6 inches, and we pulled a tape measure. On the right-hand side, it's about 3 feet from the corner of the retaining wall. On the left-hand side, it's about 4 feet. So the advantage of this, on the original retaining wall proposal, is the retaining walls were going all the way past, essentially affecting 180 degrees of roots on these trees. Now we're less than 90 degrees of these roots. So, speaking with our arborist, he says it's just going to help increase the chance of survival. Emerald Hills, we drove around the neighborhood. I have 5 dozen photos showing trees that are within a foot of retaining walls. It's not uncommon practice to build retaining walls close to trees. And trees. We're going to be planting 10 new trees: western redbuds, redwood trees, Japanese maples, oak trees. And I believe it's now 2 within setback. I thought it was originally 3 within the setback. But just ultimately, we're going to plant them in a way that's going to block privacy or increase privacy to the neighbors. And then this is just kind of the bullet points of design review standards. The site planning, on the right-hand side, Peter's house is over 50 feet away from our project. And then on the left-hand side, about 15 feet. The patio spaces are on the front and the back of the property, not on the sides. So we don't have, if you're having a guests over, you're not going to be, noise is going to be projecting out into their side of their spaces. The architectural style, it conforms with the area. It's very similar to what you'd see in the Emerald Hills area. The building shape, it articulates well. These are all pretty straightforward. The facades articulate how they pop in and out. Have different material types. The roofs are pitched. This is what Emerald Hills wants. With that, I'll just kind of close on the Planning Commissioner's quote here. The project not only meets but exceeds expectation of privacy. And I'm not sure which commissioner said this, but one of them said that at the last meeting. So, questions?
Okay. Okay. You have 6 minutes left, and you have a couple more speakers on your team, or do you want to just Mr. Karach or Mr. Androlini?
Good morning, members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm an attorney, not an arborist, so I'm not going to take sides in that battle, except I do believe that my clients, who are the applicants, have picked the right arborist. And this arborist believes that the project, as the trees are outlined, will work. And, of course, Nick and Ryan, being young people enthusiastic to make the neighbors happy, have gone overboard in trying to address all of their concerns. And that's evidenced really by the Planning Commission's approval of this project. The Community Development Director approved this project. The staff unanimously approved this project. And every time they came up with an objection, Nick and Ryan met it and made concessions. And what I see here really is a couple of neighbors who don't want anything built there, okay? In fact, they tried to buy this property and didn't buy it. So now we have a situation where they're trying to really create it into a public park or their own private park. These people have done quite a bit, done everything they could to satisfy all objections. And as Nick said, well beyond issues of privacy. I mean, the trees, the privacy, the drainage, the this, the that. And it's only a 1,900 square foot house. I mean, it's not like they're building the Empire State Building here. They got a 1,900 square foot house and a 400 square foot garage or something like that. It's a very modest project. And these people on either side have very large houses. And so this is a lot to do about nothing, really. They've done what they were required to do. They met every objection presented adequately and beyond adequately. And I think they deserve fairness here, too. I think they deserve this project. They've been at it for a year, and they keep on getting objections, new objections, 10 minutes before the hearing, week before the hearing, all kinds of different objections. I mean, enough is enough, please. Thank you very much.
Can I ask one question? I failed to ask this to the applicant, but is the applicant open to moving the house at this point? I mean, it seemed, as I understood it, it was centered at one point, but then there was a big emphasis on saving trees, so you would try to accommodate that. And I guess that's why you shifted it, to save the trees. Yeah, so I'm just kind of where you stand on that at this point.
I don't believe the house was ever centered. In terms of actual plans being submitted, I don't think it was ever centered. We shifted the house, we kept it to the left because we initially wanted to make space between the light well for the master bedroom, because it is tucked into the hill and it's going to be very dark in that space. And that's a concern that Ryan had, being he's going to live in this space. And we wanted to make sure we could maximize the space between the trees and that light well. So we kept it to the left. And I think we're going to hold firm on keeping it where it's at, because we build houses all the time, and we build close to trees, and it's never been an issue. So I think.
So just so I understand, so it's preferable from your view to have it located as proposed here because of the light well. Is that what you said? I mean,
so the light well protrudes from the actual face of the house, so that if we were to center it on the house, that wall would get then closer to the trees on the right-hand side of the property. And there's actually 5 oak trees on the right-hand side of the property, so the entire house would get closer. So the issue that the neighbors were having with these trees potentially dying in the future, it was contradicting that they wanted it centered, but they wanted these trees to survive. So we kept it to the left, and so that will give us the most space from those trees so that we can help better ensure that they're going to live.
I still haven't.
I'll tell you what.
Preserving these trees is not preserving these trees is not really your objective in siting the house. It's the light. In other words, explain again why you want it the way it is with 7.5 on one side. Why is that preferable?
Trying to maintain trees, but also maintain the light well isn't going to move. That space is defined. So we're trying to move it to the left as much as possible away from these trees, because we're going to have to excavate for that wall.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for these two gentlemen? Then Mr. Ingram and Mr. Thompson, you also will have 15 minutes.
There's just the first slide. That's all I need.
Good morning, Madam President and honorable board members. My name is Peter Ingram. I live at 2039 Cordilleras Road. My neighbor and co-appellant Seth Thompson lives at 2027 Cordilleras Road, as you've previously heard. And by the way, we only need about 5 or 6 of your minutes of your time. Okay. You've received a letter dated November 15th from our attorney, Camus Steinmetz. The letter describes our key concerns about the proposed project at 2029 Cordilleras Road and offers your board some requested changes to the conditions of approval of the project. You will note that as we've gone through prior steps of the process, we've continued to narrow our focus to the most important things that we consider vital to this project. The slide in front of you outlines those proposed changes that appeared in the letter. So why are we in front of you today? Quite simply, we had no choice. So I want to start first by talking about the process that we've been through. You've heard references to conversation. There has been some conversation, but they were certainly not voluntary. There really was no outreach whatsoever ahead of the project being submitted for approval through the county planning process. So we began to track the project through the county's online system, and as plans were submitted, and there were several sets of plans that were submitted in sequence, we went to planning, spent time trying to understand what the applicant was proposing. We also felt compelled to send questions and comments to the planning staff in an effort to better understand what's going to be built and how is it going to be built and does it comply with your design review guidelines. Our experience was mostly frustration and unnecessary confusion. Throughout the pre-design review officer hearing period, we were not aware that staff was simply forwarding our comments to the applicant, who in turn was apparently making changes to their plans. But there was no closing of those loops back with us, so consistently the message we were picking up is, we'll tell you when the hearing is scheduled. Without knowing this, an applicant might think they've been dealing with some sort of rogue moving target who was bound and determined to stop their project. I can assure you that's not been our intent. We've simply been doing our best to participate in a very opaque process. Second, the fundamentals. The purpose of the design review standards is to preserve and protect the unique qualities of the place as it becomes a denser community. And it will become denser. We all know that and we accept that. And in fact, your own policies about housing states that your overall goal for the county is to increase housing stock. And this is a good policy. But unlike a suburban subdivision, this is not simply a checklist exercise. To consider approval of a new infill home in the design review area, the zoning has an overlay of mandatory design guidelines, standards that must be met. Trees. Native trees are fundamental. However, there's a harsh reality behind the applicant's assertions. As our arborist report clearly states, at least 4 oaks along the western side of the property are unlikely to survive the deep excavations that are required to build the retaining walls for this project. Compromise. We've long expected that remaining undeveloped parcels in Cordilleras Road would become new home sites. And we have anticipated that the tree canopy and our privacy would be compromised, but within the standards. Compromise must be a part of the development process. For our part, we've tried to engage the applicant such that we could arrive at our own sense of compromise that is consistent with our expectations. We're not there yet. Third and final point, credibility. I don't need to dwell on the value and importance of credibility when it comes to land use and community development. Here's why I think I bring some credibility to this topic as I stand before this distinguished board. I'm a landscape architect by training. I've had a 36-year career that spanned the full spectrum of design, construction management, and land development. I served 19 years as an executive manager in the public works field in Bay Area cities. During that entire period, I was in charge of urban forestry programs that involved hundreds of thousands of trees and thousands of their human friends and foes. I was Redwood City's community development director and its city manager. And over the past 5 years, I've been a consultant to several prominent residential and commercial developers. My business is to help entitle land and build sustainable places for people to live and work in. Across this journey, I've built coalitions of the willing and the not so willing to honestly address community concerns about proposed changes in the built environment. And I know from experience on both sides of the table that the messy process, public process, of vetting proposals, pushing back on proponents, can and will produce better projects in the end. Now back to why we're in front of you. We don't believe that the applicant has met the design review standards, and with due respect, we disagree with your staff and your planning commission. So the key question, I think, boils down to what is, quote, as much as possible, unquote. We're entrusting your honorable board to answer this question. It is the applicant's burden to demonstrate to you that they have done as much as possible to meet the standards. We trust that you will ask the hard questions that have yet to be asked and weigh what you hear with your sound judgment and sense of what is right. We're happy to respond to questions, and we thank you for your consideration on this important topic. Seth Thompson will make a few additional remarks. Thank you.
Good morning, honorable boards members. My name is Seth Thompson. I live at 2027 Cordilleras. We are here today to review plans submitted by the applicant. The purpose of the Emerald Hills Review Design Committee was to protect existing character in the neighborhood from overdevelopment and ill-fitting plans. The plans submitted are not the best for protecting the landscape around the proposed home. My question to you is this the only way a home can be constructed? Is the design proper to fit the steep sloped and narrow lot? The applicant has been unwilling to change its design with the light well and for this proposed home. I believe the modifications we've asked for are fair and reasonable to accommodate what he has submitted. Some other comments I have about today's meeting were there was mentioned earlier that there were 8-foot ceilings being reduced to 7-foot ceilings by the DRO, and I believe that the plans have 10-foot ceilings currently. So we would only be asking them to go from a 10-foot ceiling to a 9-foot ceiling. Though the second issue was though the buckeye is not a great tree, it is some tree in between me and the neighbor. So it's not pretty, but it is screening. Our push for centering the home is if we were to center the home, we would be able to then install the planting that the applicant has said that they would provide. Currently in its status, there's only 5 feet in between the bump out of the upper story house and the property line, so it would be very difficult to put a tree to provide screening in between the direct contact in between the two houses. And centering the house would only move the house closer to the retaining wall on the upper, but move the retaining wall or the light well, if the light well design is kept, on Peter Ingram's size. As to the size of the house, all 3 houses, the proposed and the 2 neighboring houses, are all the same size, although my house and Peter Ingram's house are on twice the size lot. So they're dealing with the same size house on half the property. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate all of your efforts, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ingram or Mr. Thompson? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to see if Mr. Monowitz could sort of address, I mean, I'm sort of perplexed. My first response is to build as proposed, and I'm trying to understand why it isn't centered, and if what I thought I heard you say, this is actually a better plan and preserves the light well and preserves the trees. I'm just trying to understand that particular issue.
Sure. I'll do my best. So the proposed location on the site has been proposed for 2 reasons. Number 1, to preserve trees, but number 2, so that the light well that is important to the applicant is on the more sunny part of the property. So if you were to shift the property over so there was 10 feet on both sides, you would not only bring it in closer proximity to the coast live oaks, but you'd also shift the location of the light well into a more shady location of the property and thereby diminish its effectiveness.
I guess I have one other question. I mean, I'm more inclined to leave it as proposed, but there is a condition I would like to see, and that is to have a 6-foot wood fence. I mean, I think a chain link fence is not adequate from my perspective. And maybe that's something that's either a shared cost. I just think that's a better look for the house. But you have to, sir.
My name's Ryan Karsich. So at one point they did bring up that one of their stipulations was that we build a fence, and we actually offered to incur all the labor cost on the fence if they would split the cost of materials, and they said no. So we've been trying to work with them here, and it's common practice to split the cost of a fence. We even said we'd build it for them. We just wanted them to split the labor costs. So, and as far as, those 2 trees have been a big issue on for the whole time on the side of the property where the light well is. That light well is the only light going into the master bedroom. It's also, for fire, we need a second way to escape if there is a fire. So the light well is a way to get out of that part of the house So there are reasons we have to have this light well there. You know, they want to save the trees, so we move the house over to the left so that we can save the trees and still have our light well and our means of escape if there ever was a fire. So just wanted to address that.
Thank you.
Just one question. When you talk about the light well, you're just talking about sun access to otherwise it would be completely shaded?
Well,
is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's the only way to light into the master bedroom, because the master bedroom is sunlight, because the master bedroom is sunk down on the second floor, and our living area is on the top floor. So.
Thank you. Yeah. No, we have no more speakers.
I do want to ask a question. I'm sorry. I had one more question.
Mr. Monowitz just got up. You guys, I think he may have further answer to your question.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm available to answer the question if it's for me.
One of the conditions that the appellant, the appellant was asking for, and I've lost it, was the trees replacement. Does the condition in 6 address those trees that the appellant was talking about? It doesn't sound like the same size trees, but I don't know if they're in the same location either. I'm sort of.
So the appellant's request, yes, correct. The appellant's request is to center the house and assume that that will result in the removal of the coast live oaks on that side. The revised condition does not require that removal, and the revised condition also maintains staff's perspective that if you keep the house in its current location and abide by the arborist's recommendations, those trees are likely to survive. What we've done is we've provided more specificity regarding the replacement requirements for the trees that we anticipate will be removed by the proposed project. And what we've done is we required that the replacement trees, that there'll be 2 removed, 4 required, and the 4 replacement trees will have 2 on each side yard to try and maximize privacy on both sides of the house.
Can I just make one comment on it? I mean, I guess I understand the light issue. I can understand that. I'm glad you explained that. But the trees really look like number 9 has a hollow at base, and number 7 is decay at base. They probably should be, well, I don't know that they survive, and maybe we just replace them with the new coast live oaks. But well, I guess I could understand why they actually shifted it.
Supervisor Slocum?
Thank you. Maybe this is directed to Mr. Ingram, not sure. But I thought your testimony characterized that there was no conversation and no outreach, and the neighborhood meetings were limited, perhaps. Could you just clarify that I have that right? And were there? It sounds like there were conversations. It sounded like from the testimony there was outreach, and that there were community neighborhood meetings where they were invited over to give feedback.
Thank you. We met the applicants for the first time at the design review hearing in April. Our attorney reached out to them and offered to talk before the deadline of the Planning Commission appeal was filed, and that triggered some conversations that then were on again, off again up until the current date. So there was no neighborhood meetings. We did meet with the applicant on the site at least once to try to understand where the walls were going to be in relationship to property lines and trees. That was somewhat helpful to us, which helped us then make some gestures toward solving some of the problems. I hope, does that answer your question?
Well, yes, thank you.
Okay.
President Groom, when you're ready to close the public hearing, I might suggest the board take that action when you're ready. And then one quick comment, if I may, to Supervisor Tissier's suggestion about the fence. I just want to point out that state law, and this is in the civil code, requires that adjoining landowners share equally in the responsibility for maintaining the boundaries and monuments between them. And the state law further states that adjoining landowners are presumed to share an equal benefit from any fence. and have to share in the reasonable cost in terms of labor and construction of any fence that along the property line that they share. So I just want to point that out.
Can I ask a question in return? So I thought I heard the applicant say they'd be willing to take care of the labor if they split the material costs. Can we accept that if they're the ones that are recommending that, or said they would do that?
I mean, I guess that's a negotiation between the two property owners. I mean, if you impose something that one landowner doesn't agree to, then I suppose you impose it, and then that landowner would, the other landowner would have to sue to recover whatever money they don't agree to pay.
But if they've offered that, and we say condition based on the offer made at the hearing, is that applicable, or, I mean, no, I think I'm not saying either or. I was going to require the 6-foot fence and split the cost of the materials, because the gentleman who spoke earlier said that they would be willing to do the labor.
The way to impose that perhaps would be to say that the chain link fence would be built, or if the parties agree, splitting the cost of the materials, a solid wood fence.
Well, I guess I'm saying just the opposite. I want to require that they have to build a fence. They could split all the costs as far as I'm concerned, but I thought I heard the applicant say that he would be willing to do the labor and just split the cost of materials.
I think the difficulty, and maybe I'm wrong, is that the neighbors have not agreed to bear that cost. So if they don't agree to bear that cost, then there would be no fence unless there was the chain link fence.
Okay, and I'm assuming because of what was put in the appellant's letter is that they would want a wood fence, so I would think that would be something that would be agreeable. If not, you'd end up with the chain link fence. So I guess however we word that it'd be required unless they didn't all agree, and then it's chain link fence, and that I don't know that that's appealing to the appellant either. Have I made it as confusing as possible? Yeah. I'm certainly trying.
I think Supervisor Slocum was not finished.
Well, Supervisor, that's okay. No. Supervisor Horsley doesn't like buckeye trees, and I don't like chain link fences, and I think the wooden fence is the way to go if that can be worked out between the parties. But I just wanted to get back to this conversation, outreach, and neighborhood meeting question, because I'm sure that I heard that the neighbors came over, and I'm sure that you had a slide, I think, or slides. And I'm wondering if you could just clarify this issue of conversations, outreach, and neighborhood meetings.
So what Peter shared was correct. We didn't have an official neighborhood gathering meeting, but what we did is like I said, we indirectly took their feedback through the letters that he was writing to Erica Adams, took that feedback, implemented in the drawings, and then after that we met with their attorney at their office where we heard their concerns again. And then in addition to that, we met with them at the property, both neighbors. That's the communication that we had.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you said, and you could just clarify this for me, that you invited the neighbors over to the property to give their feedback.
At the meeting, yes. At the meeting we had at their attorney's office, I believe it was just a mutual agreement that we said, hey, let's meet at the property. It'd be a good idea.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Supervisor Pine.
Mr. Monowitz, if could you just show me point out on the appropriate slide the light wells? I think I know where they are, but just to make sure.
Actually, I'll need the applicant to do that.
Okay.
Step up here. So right here on the lower floor, the bedroom level is below grade, and so the reason that we
Suki, can you give him a mic maybe, so we can get this on the recording?
So the reason that we put the light wells there is because the bedroom level is actually below grade at the rearmost portion of that level. So what we have here is this is actually the back of the retaining wall, and the master is located about here. So the light well is to primarily provide windows and like Ryan was saying, a means of escape if a fire. So if you didn't have the light well, there would be no windows in the master bedroom.
It's centered.
And it is this section right here. And this was reduced in size to scoot it away from this tree here, and also this tree. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions where we'll need the? Okay. With that, how about a motion to close the public hearing?
Close the public hearing.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And I'd like to make a motion Oh, did you have a question?
No, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I thought you...
Go ahead.
Okay, let's see if we can go with this. I'm going to make a motion to approve the project built as proposed in the recommendation by the staff and approved by the Planning Commission with the new condition number 6, and require that there be some negotiation on a wood fence agreeable to both parties. I'd like to require the wood fence, but I don't. If you're saying we can't really, or if they don't agree, it comes back to the chain
I don't
link.
think you can really impose that. I mean, I suppose if you were to impose it, then it would be, as I said, incumbent upon the party building it to file a lawsuit against the other party who, assuming they don't agree to pay share of cost, to require, have the judge issue an order that they pay half the cost pursuant to state law. But I would probably stay away from imposing it.
Can we reflect that the applicant indicated that they would be willing to build the fence and split the cost of materials, so it's on the record that was if it doesn't happen at the end of the day, it'll be a chain link fence, but that means the appellant would have to agree to want to build a fence with them.
I think that would be appropriate.
Just so it's on the record. Sure. Other than that, that's my motion.
Second.
Second to it. Okay. Any other comments? I'd like to make a comment. I read the Planning Commission meetings and and thought that on top of that, along with I thought the Planning Commission handled this very well. And I know it's a complicated issue, but I think the results that came out of the Planning Commission meeting that are identified, be glad when we get rid of that old system where we have a page number. But beginning with C and our staff report, the staff report details very clearly what has been, what follows rules and regulations and what doesn't. And I think if you read this staff report and you followed up with what happened at the Planning Commission, I think this has been had a very good vetting, and I think that it is right to uphold the Planning Commission's decision. I think this has been thoroughly heard. There's been an awful lot of concessions made. There's been a lot of give and take, and I think that the applicants have done a very good job following all of our rules and regulations. So I'm in favor of your motion, Supervisor Tissier. Anything else, Supervisor Slocum? No. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay. Thank you very much for everybody being here today.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to be back and take on item number 5. Mr. Monowitz again.
Good morning, President Groom, Supervisors, Mr. Maltby, and Mr. Byers. The item before you is a zoning amendment to accommodate the construction of a new 15-unit, 3-story apartment building intended to house low-income families. Our senior planner, Mike Schaller, will be presenting the details of the project. I just wanted to make a couple quick opening statements and give you some of the background about how we got here. I'm sure that you are all familiar with the great work that the St. Francis Center does in the North Fair Oaks community. And in this instance, they purchased properties that had homes and a number of violations, illegal constructions, illegal units. And they have done an incredible job of reaching out to the Planning and Building Department and working with us to not only address the violations that previously existed on the property, but also to meet our objective of providing housing for those who are most in need of it. So the zoning amendment here allows them to construct this affordable housing apartment complex. It's required because it necessitates some variance from our typical regulations, and Mike Schaller is here to explain those.
Good morning, President Groom, members of the board, Mr. Maltby, Mr. Byers. The project before you is a proposed rezoning, a proposed zoning text and map amendment to rezone 2 parcels from multifamily residential to planned unit development in order to construct a 15-unit, 3-story apartment building that is specifically intended for low-income families. The project is located at 2626 and 2642 Marble Avenue in North Fair Oaks. The Sienna Center is directly across the street. This is a slightly older air photo, but the Sienna Center is actually at this location right here. The site is located in a multifamily residential zoning district, and there are a number of apartment complexes in the surrounding neighborhood. There's one large multifamily apartment building right there. The surrounding neighborhood is a mix of single-story and 2-story buildings. The applicant, the St. Francis Center, is proposing to construct an L-shaped building, 3-story multifamily housing development. The building will include 15 apartments. On the ground floor, there are 2 one-bedroom units located right there, and a 2-bedroom unit. The community room is located on this floor as well, located right here in the corner. The second and third floors have the same layout, and each floor contains 3 2-bedroom units and 3 3-bedroom units. There are also study rooms and on-site laundry rooms on these upper floors. The applicant is proposing 18 parking spaces for residents of the development, which are located here, and 2 guest parking spaces located right here. The building as proposed will be 3 stories tall with a roof peak of just over 39 feet above grade. I'd like to show you some color elevations of the building so that you get an impression of what is proposed. This first perspective is from Nottingham Avenue, and you can see this area right here. That's actually the gate that will allow access into the parking area. And then here is the entrance into the lobby, and here's the community room. Next perspective is from Marlborough Avenue. And again, here's the community room and the individual doorways into the ground floor apartments. This perspective is from the adjacent residence on Marlborough Avenue. That's just the back side of the building. And then the final perspective is from the adjacent residence on Nottingham Avenue. And here's the parking. Again, this would be behind a wall separating the adjacent residence from the proposed apartment building. As discussed in your staff report, the Planning Commission found the project to be consistent with the policies of the North Fair Oaks Community Plan, particularly with policies intended to promote the creation of affordable housing options within the community. The Commission also found that there was sufficient evidence to support the findings for a planned unit development. With regards to CEQA, the proposed rezoning qualifies for statutory exemptions for affordable housing and residential infill projects that are contained within the Act. A public workshop for this project was held on August 26th of this year at the Sienna Center. A summation of the comments received at the workshop was included as attachment G of your staff report. In addition, the North Fair Oaks Community Council held 2 different study sessions on this project. Issues raised at both the workshop and the council meetings concerned parking, temporary displacement of existing residents, and impacts to privacy for adjacent homes. Regarding parking, it was noted many times that there is insufficient on-street parking in the project area and in the North Fair Oaks area in general. There are a number of reasons for this, including spillover parking from the nearby commercial zone on El Camino Real. To address this issue, the County Manager's Office has formed a parking task force to create solutions to this neighborhood-wide problem. With regards to this project, the applicant's original proposal included 15 resident parking spaces. In response to the public comments, the applicant reworked their parking plan and increased the number of resident spaces to 18 in order to be as in compliance with the county parking regulations as possible. Regarding temporary displacement of the existing residents, this was one of the most controversial issues raised at the hearings and caused the North Fair Oaks Council to continue the item to a second meeting. At the Planning Commission hearing, the applicant was able to confirm that they have found replacement housing for 2 of the 3 families to be displaced. The final major issue raised at the hearings involved privacy for the adjacent residents to the west. Scroll up. So screening for this residence here. To address the concerns of this neighboring property owner, the applicant modified their plans by substantially reducing the size and style of the windows on the second and third floors. You'll see these windows here are substantially smaller than the other windows that are for bedrooms along the farther back wall. And this was done to provide a little bit more privacy for the adjacent property owner. In addition, the applicant is proposing to use frosting on the lower halves of these windows, again, to provide a little bit more privacy to the adjacent property owner. So in conclusion, staff is recommending that the Board of Supervisors approve the proposed zoning text and map amendments by adopting the required findings and conditions of approval as contained in Attachment A of your staff report. Are there any questions I can answer for the board at this time?
Supervisor CA?
The location here is within either a quarter mile or a half mile of public transportation?
There is a, as I was informed by the applicant, there is a parking, there is a bus stop out in front of the Sienna Center.
Okay.
It is farther away though to any to Caltrain.
But that bus connection would take them.
Yes, so the bus routes. So there are bus pickups there.
The other question I have, you have 15 units, and I assume each unit is one family, some larger or some smaller?
That is correct. So one of the goals of the applicant was to provide large apartments. There's a lack of 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, rental units in the area. In the county in general. Most of what's being constructed now, if market rate, tends to be 1 bedroom or studios, catering to a different clientele. So that was one of the goals, I think, of the applicant, and so hence that's the preponderance of the units are 2 and 3 bedroom units.
Okay. The reason I ask that also affects parking. If you have more than one family in a 2 to 3 bedroom apartment, you're no longer talking one resident per one family.
That is correct.
Per unit,
The analysis that's contained in your staff report, we believe that given the economic situation of many of the future residents of this, it's likely they will only have 1 car. There are going to be 3 extra parking spaces within, so 15 units, but 18 total parking spaces.
But that's why I asked about the bus routes, or within a quarter or half mile of any kind of transit, because with traffic being what it is, if they can hop on a bus across the street, they'd probably be better off. It takes them obviously to where they need to go. So I mean that's good that there's something close by. So I'm fine.
It's a low income housing, I guess.
Yes.
Is the rent? Is there some formula that the rent has to be like 30% of gross income?
I believe the applicant can probably provide greater detail as to their criteria for who will be accepted. So if that's all right with you, I'll turn that question over to the applicant to answer.
Any other questions for Mr. Mallory? No? Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Sister Christina Heltzley, and it's a pleasure to be here. I think rather than just my talk about the project, which I think is amazing, I'd like to address your questions directly. I think that what is required by the county is 28 spaces, and we really, really worked hard to make it 20 spaces. The other thing is that we are reclaiming 2 on-street spaces because the cutouts that were there will no longer exist. So we are reclaiming 2 spaces on the street. Supervisor TCA, you just had a question and it escaped my mind. Oh, I think it was in regards to the standard that we use the same one that the county uses, and it will be for extremely low, very low, and low income folks.
So is it rent that is it 30% of gross income? Is that the standard?
It changes depending on this like if it's extremely low, or very low or low, but we never go above the extremely low and the very low. It's 30 AMI.
Is it poverty level?
Using that standard, the extremely low is 30% of the median income,
Right.
and the very low is 50.
Okay.
So we'll be using those standards and those same rent numbers that are set by HUD and by the county each year.
Can I ask one quick question about reclaiming the 2 spaces on the street? If that's a public street, do you have the ability, Mr. Byers, to claim those spots?
Yeah, I'm going to refer the question over to Deputy County Counsel Tim Fox, who's been assigned to this project.
And I only ask that because if you think you have them and then someone takes a spot and you go tell them you can't have it and it's a public street, that could cause an issue. And I just want to.
I didn't mean reclaim in that way. I meant that what used to be there as a cutout or driveway space will no longer be.
But it'll be 2 spaces on the street.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. Because I'm going to reclaim the ones in front of my house if I can.
We're restoring because there are currently 3 curb cuts for driveways as the sites exist.
I understand. It was the terminology that had me confused.
Supervisor Slocum?
Thank you. Just one question. It seemed like there was one resident or one family that could not be housed of the current residents. Is that, or did you subsequently find?
I'm going to let Michael speak to that. He's the chair of my board, but we have worked extremely hard to make sure that the families. I know that you're aware that when someone purchases a property in our area, they demand that it be tenant-free. We, of course, did not do that. Also, the rents are raised as soon as a new owner takes hold of the property. We also did not raise the rent. So those families, in fact, have been subsidized $10,200 apiece just this year. And so it's a moral layer for us. It isn't a requirement by law that we rehome these people, but we are going to rehome these people. And the one family that has not yet been assisted to find housing, we will find housing for them, and we are committed to paying the delta between what their rent is now and what it will be when we find housing for them.
So I don't know to what extent the Department of Housing or county resources have been put toward trying to find the one family housing, but maybe we could put Sister Christina in touch with some county resources for that one family and try to get them quickly housed. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Any wrap-ups? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a number of public speakers now. Jacqueline Rueda.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Jacqueline Rueda. Estoy aquí apoyando el proyecto San Leos.
Good morning, my name is Jacqueline Rueda and I'm here in support of the St. Leo's project.
Porque este proyecto le traería la oportunidad a 15 nuevas familias que posiblemente estén viviendo en la calle.
I'm here supporting the project because this is a good opportunity for 15 families to be have a home.
Estas familias tendrán la oportunidad de tener una vivienda digna, económica y en una comunidad segura.
These families will have an opportunity to live in a safe environment.
Este proyecto, desafortunadamente, solo traería un poco de alivio a la gran necesidad que hay de tener viviendas económicas.
Unfortunately, this project is only a small piece of the struggles that they face.
Así como yo tengo la oportunidad de vivir en una comunidad segura y económica, apoyo que 15 más familias tengan esta misma oportunidad.
Just like she's been giving this opportunity, she supports the project so that 15 more families can have the same opportunity she does.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming today. Roxana Cruz.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Roxana Cruz. Good morning, my name is Roxana Cruz. También estoy apoyando el proyecto San Leo. I'm also here in favor of the project St. Leo's. Porque un día yo no tenía dónde vivir. One day I didn't have a place to live. Andaba con mis hijos, viajaba desde Mountain View, donde una familia que me dio alojamiento. She would travel with her children from Mountain View, living with a family that let her stay there. Me acuerdo que venía manejando un día y mi hija de 8 años me dijo que se quería morir. She was driving with her kids one day and her 8-year-old daughter had mentioned that she wanted to die. Y desde ese día, gracias a Dios, me dieron vivienda donde estoy viviendo en los apartamentos de Sister Cristina. From that day forward, she was able to get housing in one of Sister Christina's apartment complexes. No me pidió mucho la manager, solo mi depósito, mi renta. Por eso estoy apoyando este proyecto para que ayuden a otras personas. Sorry. At that time, they didn't ask her for much, just a deposit and her rent, and they gave her that opportunity to be living there, and that's why she supports the project. Como dijo Jacqueline, hay otras familias que no tienen dónde vivir en este momento con niños, mamás solteras como yo, y yo sé que lo vamos a lograr con el apoyo de las personas y de Dios. She says that people like her are also out there with no housing, single mothers with small children, and she knows that with the help of others and God and Sister Christina that they'll be able to find housing soon. Hoy estoy en sus apartamentos, mis hijos están hasta con mejores notas en la escuela porque no tienen esa preocupación de dónde vivir. Her kids are now doing well, and they're doing well in school because they live in a good environment. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Sylvia Mendoza.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Silvia Mendoza. Solamente estoy aquí para apoyar el proyecto de San Francis Center. A mí me gustaría que escucharan esta voz, que no nada más vean.
She's here supporting the St. Francis Center just so that you could hear her voice and not only see.
Que vean el cómo ayudar a la persona, sino que tan solo vean también en los niños que son los que andan sufriendo.
For you to see that you're not only helping them, but also the small children that are out there suffering.
Pienso que aquí más que nada es la oportunidad que se les brinda a ellos y que se nos brinda a uno como persona.
It gives them great opportunities and not only for them, but also for the kids, just gives them a good opportunity and way of living.
Pienso que no es una razón los parqueaderos, sino que hay personas que tienen sus propias casas y tienen demasiados carros y eso es obvio, que se tienen lleno afuera también.
She's saying that the issue of parking is not really an issue, that there are other people that have multiple cars that live around the area, so she doesn't see that to be a big issue.
También hay personas que desgraciadamente no tienen dónde vivir y por unas perdemos todas.
Sometimes that's the reason that they lose those opportunities and having a good place to live.
Yo quiero que vean la necesidad de lo que hay en realidad, porque a veces nos dejamos llevar por lo material, sino no lo espiritual.
Sometimes that we lose sight of what is really needed and not what is spiritually needed.
Yo espero en ustedes y en Dios que se logre este proyecto porque muchas personas se ayudarían.
Just hopes and just good thoughts of supporting the project and having you and God by their sides to support the project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mendoza. Rosabella Guzman.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Rosalba Guzmán y estoy aquí para apoyar en los apartamentos de San Leo.
She's here in support of the St. Leo's project.
Yo vengo a apoyar los apartamentos porque ellos me brindaron ayuda cuando yo más lo necesité. Yo estuve en una situación muy difícil, estaba embarazada.
They lent her support when she really needed it. She was in a difficult situation where she was pregnant.
Donde yo vivía, los apartamentos se quemaron.
The apartment complex she lived in burnt down.
Estuve por 2 meses viviendo en un hotel.
She lived in a hotel for 2 months.
De una calidad muy baja.
Very poor quality.
Agradezco a las personas que me ayudaron porque era preferible aceptar eso que vivir en la calle.
She was grateful for the opportunity that was given to her at that time because it was better than living on the street.
Las únicas personas que me ayudaron fue Sister Cristina.
The only people that helped her were Sister Christina.
Al brindarme un apartamento después de 2 meses, porque la ayuda se iba a terminar en 2 meses.
Sister Christina was able to give her an opportunity because that was going to run out in 2 months. She could only stay there for 2 months.
Y teníamos que dejar el hotel e irnos. Yo estaba embarazada, gracias a Dios, a ellos. Pude obtener el apartamento una semana antes de dar a luz.
She was only going to have that help for 2 months, and Sister Christina helped her. She was able to move in a week before she gave birth.
Por eso yo los apoyo a ellos para que brinden oportunidad a todas las personas que como yo o peor en otra situación muy difícil.
That's why she's here supporting the project because like people like her, there are far worse. There's other people far off that she is. So that's why she's supporting the project.
Tengan la oportunidad de conseguir una vivienda. Y quizá me gustaría que quizá hubiera más gente como ellos, porque ahorita estamos viviendo una situación muy difícil a causa de tanto edificio que se está construyendo. Es bueno, pero también es muy cara la renta.
She wants more help like this around for people like her. There's a lot of construction going on, and with that is higher rent, and so it's hard for people to find housing.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guzman, for coming today. That's our last public speaker card, so we'll...
Close the public hearing.
All in favor?
Aye. Can I ask a quick question? Just more out of curiosity than anything else. What's the square footage of each of the units, the 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom? I was just trying to get Mr. Hagman to come forward. I hadn't seen him in a long time. Thought that was you back there.
Roger Hagman. They're all different sizes, but 800, 900, and 1,000 square feet.
Okay, so decent size. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, just curious.
Okay.
You know me, I had to get you up here, Roger.
Thank you.
What's your pleasure?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing, to approve the proposed zoning text and map amendments, to adopt the ordinance to enact applicable only to the subject parcels, the PUD 138, and adopt the ordinance to change the subject parcel zoning map designation from R3 to PUD 138, and waive the reading of the ordinance in its entirety.
Second.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Yes,
Yeah,
isn't that
it's a
the
great
truth?
project.
Isn't that the truth? Okay, we'll now take up item number 6.
Before you go to item 6, I just wanted to take the opportunity to introduce Janeth Lujan, who did the translation services. She's our Planning Commission secretary, new addition to our office, and fantastic employee, and I'm so pleased to have her on staff. So I just want to say thank you to Janeth.
Yes, thank you.
Good morning, President Groom, members of the board, Mr. Maltby, Mr. Byers. My name is David Silverman. I'm a Chief Deputy County Counsel for the county, and I am assigned by Mr. Byers to represent the Office of Sustainability. I am here to address the JPA agreement that will help form Peninsula Clean Energy. This is actually the 4th consecutive meeting that the board has had something on its agenda related to community choice energy, so I won't belabor what it is. I think the board is very familiar with what it is. One of the models to have community choice energy in our county is a JPA, a Joint Powers Authority. The Public Utilities Code provides for forming a JPA for this purpose, and the direction that the Office of Sustainability went or was given was to form a JPA. Our understanding was that the board believes and believed that that is most consistent with the spirit of cooperation in our county. So what we did is we set out to draft the best JPA agreement that we could. It started with the JPA agreements that were developed by both Marin Clean Energy and Sonoma Clean Energy. My colleague, Catherine Miola, another chief deputy, carefully analyzed those two documents and evaluated the key differences. She then presented some key decision points to this board, to the Office of Sustainability, and to the advisory committee that was set up to help guide the process of forming Peninsula Clean Energy, and received guidance on some key decision areas, and those were presented to the board on October 6th during the study session when we received guidance from the board. In the interim, the draft agreement that went out to all of the city attorneys in the county. Mr. Byers sent it out with a description of the program and basically what our goal was, which was to develop a JPA agreement that everybody could be reasonably happy with. We then held a series of meetings with the city attorneys, actually 2 meetings, the first of which was extremely well attended. I would estimate that over 75% of the cities were represented. Supervisor Pine was there, as well as the Office of Sustainability. It was a very, very good meeting, and it was so good that we couldn't finish in one meeting. We received a lot of great feedback from the city attorneys. We incorporated that feedback. We held a second meeting. We incorporated that feedback. During that time period, I would say that there were dozens of emails back and forth between myself, my colleagues, and the various city attorneys. And the result is an agreement that is actually quite good. It's a collaborative agreement that takes into account all of the various comments we received from the cities. And we're actually not done. We're meeting with the city attorneys again tomorrow, not so much on the JPA agreement, but to give them an opportunity to ask whatever questions they have regarding the project, to make sure that they're able to advise their councils as best they can as to why this is a great program for the county. So unless the board has any questions, we're simply asking that the court authorize, that the board, you know where I normally appear, that the board authorize Supervisor Groom to sign the JPA agreement on behalf of the board and the county. And if she does that over the next couple of months, the Office of Sustainability will continue its robust outreach efforts to the cities. And if at least 2 cities also agree to form the JPA, and we fully suspect they will, the JPA will take effect on February 29th of 2016. And I believe that as part of this item as well, Supervisor Groom has a recommendation to appoint 2 members of the board to the new JPA.
Item number 7.
Yeah. Oh, is that number 7? I'm sorry. Okay. Well then, unless there are any questions, that is the sum total of my presentation.
You want to say something?
I'd just like to take a moment to thank you for your great work on this. I did have the chance, as you mentioned, to attend the meeting with the 15 lawyers, and this document has been scrutinized probably like none other, but it really has benefited from all that input, and also was a good opportunity to provide a lot of education to local council, city councils, attorneys about how this program operates, because ultimately they're important advisors to their councils on the matter. So I think it worked out extremely well, and really grateful for your personal contribution.
It was my pleasure, and I'm part of a great team. I did count it up. I believe this is the 10th draft of the agreement. I believe it's the 4th one that I've labeled final, if I'm not mistaken. But yet, I think the key point that I probably should have mentioned is the key decision points that this board and that the committee provide, the guidance that we were provided. The key decision points remain the same. Most of the changes, and there were quite a few, were, I'm not going to say they were just wordsmithing. They were important changes, but they didn't modify the key decision points that we were given.
Prepared to move approval?
So I'll second it.
I just have a couple of questions. I guess I still am a little bit skeptical about the whole project. Essentially, I'm not necessarily opposed to it necessarily, but my skepticism is that how do we really have the sophistication to actually enter this kind of a market of purchasing power? And the other is that I know PG&E is under a lot of pressure to actually provide more renewables, so we're going to be in a very competitive market. And I know we compared ourselves to Sonoma and Marin County, but they're pretty small. I mean, they don't have Genentech and Facebook and Google, and so if I'm really skeptical of our ability to actually be competitive. But necessarily, I assume I know there's a lot of smart people who are working on this who think differently. But the question I had last time was, if we're going to borrow $20 million, and if something goes south, and who's going to end up with the liability? And I know you've said it's the JPA, but as far as I'm concerned, the JP is really us.
No.
Okay, so part of your question might be better answered by Mr. Eggemeyer, but I'll take a shot at it, and he can correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you asked about whether we have the capability to be competitive. As an observer, and I'm just a lawyer, I mean, we have contracted with 2 consultants. One of them is Lean Energy.
Well, of course they're going to tell you that. I mean, they wouldn't be in business if they.
Wait a minute.
No, I'm not speaking to how whether or not the information they're providing is accurate. Obviously, I hope that it is, but your cynicism is well placed. But I thought that the thrust of your question was, do we have the ability, do we have the background in order to do it? And my response to that would be, based on my observation, the consultants that we've retained are the best, and they know how to do it, and they're advising us. And then ultimately, once the JPA is formed, the JPA is going to hire an executive who knows what he or she is doing. So, not that we don't, but I think that addresses part of it. As far as the price competitiveness part, I mean, I think that what we've observed is that PG&E is a profit-making organization. That's their goal, is to make profit. The goal of Peninsula Clean Energy is going to be, obviously, the goals are going to be set by the board, but the 2 primary goals that we expect are savings to customers and improving the environment. And all of that money that goes to PG&E profits can be reinvested in lowering prices and funding local projects that will benefit the community. So I think that there's sort of a competitive advantage because it's not a for-profit entity. And then I believe the third issue, maybe you can help me, there was one other issue that you raised.
Question of liability.
The question of liability. So, thank you. The JPA agreement, what it provides is that that any exposure that the JPA creates by entering into agreements will be with the JPA. And so that's by design. It's what the Public Utilities Code provides for. It's actually what the Joint Exercise of Powers Act provides for. As a lawyer, I'm never going to tell the board, as I'm sure Mr. Byers would never tell the board, that there's no liability. But the design of the program is such that there will not be exposure. In addition, there are other risk management tacks that we can take to also avoid exposure. For example, what I understand Sonoma and Marin have done is within their contracts with power providers, they've written in to those agreements, you agree that you are not going to go after any of the constituent members. But with the reference to the $20 million, I mean, to the extent that the county is asked to do a loan guarantee, or to the extent that the county actually puts money into the JPA agreement, that money is certainly at risk in the event that the Peninsula Clean Energy were to fail. Now, that's not what we expect to happen, but things that we don't expect sometimes do happen. Is that responsive?
I'd like to make a comment, Supervisor Horsley. We've engaged a firm called Peninsula Energy Advisors who have done a very long, detailed technical report that really does delineate that there are plenty of providers in the state that can bring renewable energy to us at fairly affordable prices, and that there are enough of those firms. And right for the next, we're in a very positive energy period right now, and they expect that to last for the next several years. So there is a lot of renewable energy available, and Sonoma and Marin and Lancaster and others have been able to have good prices and bring that in, and their recommendation to us is that we will be able to do the same. And I don't know if you've read the PEA technical report yet, but it's good reading. Yeah. And I think that we are safe on the idea of being able to purchase power and distribute the renewable power.
I just add a comment. I think you articulated the three concerns. So the one about our potential liability, is, I think you should feel very confident about that. El Cerrito recently joined Marin's Community Choice Energy Program. They asked that question and hired outside counsel and really, brought it yet another. So that one is, I think, the easiest of the three. The second one is, can we compete with PG&E, and how does that look? So, that's where the PEA report comes in. I think of the three you mentioned, the one that would pose the most risk is the operational side. So between January and the proposed launch of October, it's all about the operation. And, we're in the process of putting together a very, detailed, timeline, a set of deliverables. And early on in that process, we're going to start, we'll start to staff up this entity. The JPA will be hopefully seated in March, and so the formation of that team, is important. But we think we do have a very specified timeline for kind of moving that ball forward. So anyway, so kind of those three, I think the operational one is the one we're going to be most focused on, because I think the other two are pretty well in hand. The operational one is where we're going to have to show that we can do it.
Well, I would just, maybe my experience has been that with consultants, and I know that Sequoia Healthcare District, when they had their consultants and they talked about how they were going to invest in a new hospital, and they were going to, Goldman Sachs was supposedly one of the best, and they allegedly were going to be receiving a couple $1 million a year, when in fact they end up with nothing. So I always have this healthy skepticism for consultants. But nevertheless, I will defer to my two colleagues who have done, I know, a yeoman's work on this, and I know there's a whole group of city council people as well as city attorneys that have really studied this in depth. I just thought I would express my skepticism, so I appreciate your answers.
I think the other piece, Don, is in addition to meeting with the city attorneys, we had a very long session this week or last week with the city financial directors. And they asked a lot of key questions, and they seemed to leave with answers that they thought were okay.
Yeah. And I also remember when, it wasn't that long ago, when California was experiencing brownouts. And of course, we know it was fraud and all that, but if that was a pretty sophisticated market that was kind of fooled by by others, by out-of-state people, it was both the state of California's energy, whatever they call that system, as well as PG&E and others. And so my just skepticism, but I will. I think that you've answered most of my concerns, and I'm willing to support this.
Mr. Regmeyer, do you want to add anything? Okay. Okay. We have a motion and we have a second on the floor to authorize and execute the Joint Powers Authority. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay.
President Groom, maybe I should say Judge Groom, but if I may just give a brief thank you to Chief Deputies David Silverman and Kathy Miola, who've spent a lot of time on this, doing excellent legal work on this JPA, and then also for their general legal support for the whole project.
You're absolutely right. They've been extraordinary.
Might also, I really appreciate his explanation as well. I know that they've really thought of all the issues, and I really appreciate his answering my questions.
Okay, item number 7 is I am recommending to you that we appoint Supervisor Pine and Supervisor Groom to the Peninsula Clean Energy Authority Board of Directors, and the appointment of Jim Eggemeyer, who is the Director of the county's Office of Sustainability, as the alternate to serve in the absence of the 2 county directors.
Do you need a motion on that?
Sure.
I'll move that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now we'll go to the county manager.
You should have put
Item number 8.
Okay. Good morning, Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Maltby and Mr. Byers. My name is Peggy Jensen. I'm Deputy County Manager. I'm here this morning to talk to you along with Melissa Andrikopoulos, who is one of the Deputy County Counsels, about the proposed urgency ordinance regarding a moratorium on the closure and conversion of mobile home parks in the unincorporated San Mateo County. So why are we here to talk about an urgency ordinance? In San Mateo County, in the unincorporated area, there are 8 mobile home parks. They include about 850 spaces for mobile homes, and what we found in our research is that about 350 of those spaces are actually occupied by what we would consider traditional mobile homes or manufactured homes. The balance of those sites are occupied by travel trailers, RVs, or other types of mobile shelter. The important thing that we found in looking at mobile home parks is mobile home parks are a location for affordable housing. They're a place where seniors live, where low-income families live. And the reason that we're bringing this urgency ordinance forward to you is because many of the pressures, or actually all the pressures that exist on low-income housing in the county also exist in mobile home parks. The first is demand. We found that demand for sites for mobile homes far exceeds the available number of sites. So obviously this is a type of housing that is very much needed in the county. In addition, there is regional pressure for the redevelopment of mobile home parks. In Palo Alto and in Pacifica, there are both projects proposed. In Palo Alto, there's proposed closure of a large mobile home park. In Pacifica, the proposal is to convert a mobile home park that's currently available to, or affordable to many families, to a luxury manufactured home park. And finally, the City of San Jose recently adopted a temporary moratorium similar to the one that you have before you today in response to an application to close a large mobile home park in Winchester Avenue. The third reason we're bringing this forward today is because it is very difficult for owners of traditional mobile homes, manufactured homes, to relocate if, in fact, their park where they're located is closed or converts to another type of use. This is because most mobile home parks require the installation only of new mobile homes. They don't take mobile homes that have been located elsewhere. And finally, we're here before you today because you have clearly directed staff to take steps to promote the development of more affordable housing and also preserve existing affordable housing throughout the county. So that's why we are bringing this forward to you today. I'd like to turn over the microphone to Ms. Andrikopoulos. She will talk to you about the urgency ordinance adoption process and present the details of the ordinance to you. After that, we will both be available to answer questions.
Thank you. Good morning, Supervisors. Again, my name is Melissa Andrikopoulos. I'm a Deputy County Counsel here at the county. So briefly, just to review the authority for adoption of this type of urgency ordinance, it is provided for in the state government code, and it authorizes your board to adopt a temporary moratorium when the county is studying a general plan or a zoning proposal that the approval of additional entitlements could conflict with the proposal that you're studying. There are some required findings laid out in the state code, and those include that there is a current and immediate threat to the public health, safety, or welfare, and that approving additional entitlements during that moratorium would result in that threat. It essentially allows you to preserve the status quo while you study potential legislative changes. State law does set forth a process for adopting these type of ordinances. County staff chose to provide notice of today's hearing on the urgency ordinance. We did that through publication in the San Mateo County Times 10 days before today's meeting. We also mailed notice to the 8 mobile home park owners, and we've also made efforts to contact various community and business organizations that we thought might be interested in today's hearing. So the process for adopting and or extending an interim ordinance includes a requirement of a 4/5 vote of your board. And if you, in fact, adopted the ordinance before you today, it would take effect immediately, and it could remain in effect for up to 45 days, which would put us to the 1st of next year. Before that 45-day period expires, the board does have the opportunity to extend the interim ordinance for an additional 22 months and 15 days. That would bring you to a total period of moratorium for 2 years. Prior to extending any interim ordinance, you do have to issue a report 10 days before the expiration that explains what steps you have been taking to address the problems. And any extension would also need to occur at a meeting of the board and with notice. Based on your calendar with the holidays, that would probably put us at a December 15th meeting. And just to briefly review what the proposed ordinance would do, we're really looking to take a deeper look into what state law provides and what options are available to the county to preserve this source of affordable housing and to mitigate the impact of any conversions. So existing state law does impose some requirements on the owners of mobile home parks if they seek to convert or to close. They do have to submit a relocation impact report to the county, and the county does have the opportunity to impose mitigation on the owners in order to approve that closure. A number of jurisdictions throughout the state have adopted supplemental local regulations to further articulate both the process and what potential conditions could be. We've identified over 40 jurisdictions throughout the state, including 9 counties that have such regulations. Within the Bay Area, that includes Marin and Sonoma counties. And so the proposed ordinance in front of you today would apply to mobile home parks. It's not intended to apply to recreational vehicle parks or campgrounds. And a mobile home park is defined by state law to include any park that has 2 or more sites that are rented out to mobile homes. Mobile homes are also defined in state law. They include both the traditional mobile home and manufactured homes. Our proposed ordinance, we have slightly expanded that definition to also include other forms of mobile shelter, such as recreational vehicles, if those forms of shelter have been present on the site for at least the last 9 months and used as a primary residence. And the conversions that we would be temporarily prohibiting by this ordinance include completely closing a park, so no longer holding out at least 2 spaces for rent, or converting 2 or more spaces to a different use. So the intent would be to temporarily prohibit both conversions over time and wholesale conversions. And just to note, the ordinance would not prohibit the issuance of any permits that would be required to address health or safety issues, court orders, or any other potential permits that would affect business operations on the site, as long as it didn't constitute a conversion or closure. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Question to Supervisor Slocum?
Thank you. Just a couple. On one of the slides, you showed that you had mailed some sort of notice to the 8 mobile home parks. But I don't think the date was there of that mailing. Do you know what the date of that mailing was?
Yes, the mailing went out on Friday, November 6th.
And so on November, was it an email or a letter or a certified letter?
That was via U.S. mail.
U.S. mail. So we received this email from Doug Johnson, the Western Manufactured Housing Communities Association, Senior Regional Representative, Local Government and Public Affairs. And he said basically in the letter that we didn't give notice, but we did mail a notice to the mobile home park owners.
That's
True?
correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then I was curious about one of the slides toward the end there. You had if the motorhome had been in the park for the last 9 months, and I'm wondering why you selected 9 months.
State law actually has a provision that allows certain forms of mobile homes, or excuse me, motorhomes, to be treated as a mobile home if they've been there for 9 months. So we were trying to mirror that provision. State law is very specific about whether a tractor, truck, trailer, or a recreational vehicle, or these specific types of recreational vehicles can qualify for that protection, and we wanted to try to be as broad as possible in terms of the forms of mobile shelter. But the 9-month threshold did come from state law.
And I don't know that it matters, but it seems like there are more and more motorhomes, RVs on the streets. And in my travels to some of the mobile home parks, there seem to be quite a few. And I don't know that it matters, but is there any flexibility in adjusting that 9 months, or does that even make sense? I'm just concerned that, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, somebody bought an old motorhome and moved it into one of these parks, and they haven't been there for 9 months. Does that really matter?
I'm looking to John Niblin, our chief deputy, who's been working on this as well, to see if you have any thoughts.
Well, thank you. I know Melissa's really gotten down into the granularity of this, so I think her view is probably at least as relevant as mine. But the 9 months did, as Melissa said, come from state law, and it also is reflected, frankly, in many of the other jurisdictions' ordinances that she was referring to earlier. I think the board, to the extent that we are actually expanding beyond what state law actually provides with respect to definitions, I think that the board probably does have discretion to move beyond 9 months. But we, again, would point out that 9 months is something that a lot of other jurisdictions have incorporated and not been challenged, at least not successfully to our knowledge.
Thank you.
Maybe this is a question, Greg, maybe for your future work. In your explanation in reading about the existing state law, it notes that governing bodies can impose conditions on the conversion, and such as requiring, reasonable relocation fees. But, does state law allow entities to potentially allow us to prohibit conversions, or is that something that's off the table?
That's something that we would want to study further if the board did give that direction. There are certainly some potential issues related to takings or conflict with relevant state law. So that's something that we would look at closely.
Thank you.
Yeah, we would, just to clarify, we would certainly need to kind of analyze that question under current takings law. I mean, as you know, generally the law allows people to use property consistent with their zoning. So part of the question will depend on what the board intends to do, but it would call into question, a necessary analysis of takings law.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. We have a bunch of speakers, and thank you very much, Melissa. I'll begin with Marisol Ortega.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Marisol Ortega y yo vengo aquí a hablar más que nada. Para mí sería irreemplazable la vivienda en donde estoy porque hace años yo perdí una casa y yo soy mamá soltera.
My name is Marisol Ortega, and I am here to speak because for me this home is not replaceable. I lost a house and I'm a single mother.
Tengo dos hijos y para mí es irreemplazable la vivienda porque es un lugar seguro y sería imposible para mí pagar otro lugar.
I have 2 children and for me it will be impossible to find another place to live.
Y es un lugar seguro para muchos padres y familias que viven en ese lugar.
And this is a safe place for many families and many children who live in that place.
Gracias por su atención.
Thanks for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega.
Yes.
Ms. Turoz? Turoz? Monica? Can't read that. Excuse me for not being able to...
Oh, no, my writing, it's very special, sorry. So, good morning. It's a great pleasure being here with you. And I just want to thank you so much for having the opportunity to talk to you about this housing. And the thing that I want to share is this story about this lady that I met few months ago. A beautiful lady who has a 2-year-old beautiful kid, and she was just crying how she was living in her car with her kid, 2-year-old, for 15 days with no food, nothing but peanut butter and sandwiches and those noodle cup soups to feed the kid and get the hot water from any gas station that would let her do that. Only because she had no place to live. She lost the housing because she couldn't afford it. And if she wanted to pay something, it was just way out of her budget because a room in a house was $800 at a time, which is a lot of money. So now you just approved a low-income apartment complex, and we don't want to lose our affordable. Before, our place used to be very expensive. Now it's not expensive anymore. It's very affordable to all the families. They're only building 15 apartment complex to low-income housing families, and we are close to 150 where we live. So I only think of myself as this lady. I have 2 kids, and I only picture what if we are going to do, my husband and I, if something like this were to happen to us. Are we going to sleep in the car? Where are we going to feed them? Every day we come home and we can cook something, regardless of what we eat, but we have something, a place to cook, a place to sleep. And this mom had nothing for her kid but a car, and the cold weather was killing her and the kid. So I know the word begging, it's very out of this place, but I really hope you think of us as this mom that didn't have a place for her and her kid to sleep in, and what will happen to us if we lose this housing, affordable housing, in this market. Thank you.
Thank you for coming today. Magdalena Laura?
Buenos días, mi nombre es Magdalena Lara y estoy aquí para apoyar la comunidad en la que vivimos y... Okay, sorry.
Good morning, my name is Magdalena Lara and I'm here to support the community where we live.
A mí en lo personal me afectaría mucho si ese parque desapareciera porque yo soy retirada y está visto que con lo que te llega del Seguro Social no alcanza para el nivel de vida.
I will be very affected if this this park wouldn't exist because I'm retired, and with the money I receive from Social Security, I can barely live.
Pienso también en las familias que tienen niños, que qué traumante es para las criaturas y para las madres dejar sus hijos para ir a buscar un trabajo, atender la urgencia del dinero y desatender la importancia de la familia.
I think also of the families and the children, and how hard it is for the mothers to go out and look for a job and leave their children.
Yo pienso mucho en los niños y en las personas también de la tercera edad, porque si yo en lo particular tengo tantos años, yo no me hallo en otro lugar porque tengo más de 40 años aquí.
I think about the children and about the elderly people because I have more than 30 years living in this place, and I don't picture myself in any other place.
Yo pido a la comunidad, a todos ustedes, que pensemos tanto en las familias, porque habiendo una familia sana, hay una comunidad sana.
I ask all of you in our community to think about us and about our families, because thinking about having a healthy family, we have a healthy community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Laura. Oscar Vasquez.
Buenos días, supervisores, y agradezco el tiempo que se toman para este momento. Bueno, que entre un poquito ya.
So good morning, and I appreciate your time.
Nosotros, ya saben, vivimos en el 855 Barrón. No queremos perder nuestra vivienda porque vivimos muy bien ahí. No sé si podamos hacer algo más para hacer un cambio total para mejorar nuestra situación y no quiten los parques, porque es el lugar donde vivimos.
So I live in 855 Barron, and I would not like to lose my housing. And I would like to see where we could do something better to not lose our housing.
Yo sé que nos están apoyando, necesitamos los votos de los 5 de ustedes para que vivamos mejor. Yo sé que nos van a aportar una gran ayuda y nos han estado ayudando favorablemente hacia nosotros. Sería muy triste que nos ayuden y luego nos quiten la vivienda.
So I know we are receiving the support from you guys, and we need 5 of your votes so we could keep our housing. So it would be very sad for you to help us and then lose our housing.
Es como que si tiráramos basura, ¿verdad? Tiramos el dinero a la basura y parece ser que este es dinero de los impuestos para todos la comunidad. Aquí, como lo ven, estamos más de la mayoría y Redwood City, nosotros somos la mayoría de hispanos.
So basically he's saying it would be a waste of money, and that Redwood City has a lot of Hispanics.
Gracias por...
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Thank you. Maria de Lopez Reyes.
Buenos días, mi nombre es María Reyes. Estoy aquí para apoyar la vivienda del parking, donde estamos residentes ahorita, en este momento.
My name is Maria Reyes, and I'm here to support the housing in the park where we currently live in.
Yo soy una persona sola con mi hija. Tengo 4 años de vivir allí en ese lugar y estoy aquí para apoyar a todas las personas que vivimos allí en ese lugar.
I live with my daughter. I've been living there for 4 years, and I'm there to support all the people who live in that park.
Y sería bueno que los apoyaran porque ahorita la vivienda está muy alta y allí es un lugar muy seguro para mí y mi hija que estamos solas en esa vivienda.
I would like your support because right now rent is really high, and I'm alone with my daughter, and so we need your support. We can go anywhere else.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. Susana Zapato.
Muy buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Susana Zapata. Yo estoy apoyando el Parque Bayshore Villa porque vivo ahí.
Good morning. My name is Susana Zapata. I'm supporting the park Bayshore Villa because I live there.
Tengo ahí viviendo como 8 años y estoy apoyando a todos mis vecinos para que ese parque siga con familias y niños ahí viviendo.
I've been living there for 8 years, and I want to support the parks for families and children living there.
Y pido su apoyo para que de todos ustedes para que nos ayuden a conservar ese lugar donde vivimos tantas familias, tantos niños, tantas personas mayores que están ahí.
I request your help to keep this park where many families, many children, and many elderly people live.
Eso es todo. Gracias.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zapata. Roberto Vale.
Buenos días a todos, mi nombre es Roberto. Pues venimos, representando el parqueadero del 855 Barron Avenida, cerca de la Escuela Ferox. BH Mobile Home Park.
His name is Roberto, and he's representing the park.
BH Mobile Home Park. BH Mobile Home Park.
BH Mobile Home Park.
Y pues venimos, no estamos de acuerdo de que nos quiten el lugar donde vivimos, porque en realidad pues ahí nos acostumbramos y pues si nos quitan dónde podemos ir, así como la renta que está tan alta.
We don't want people to take away the place where we live because rent is so expensive in other places.
Y pues dónde podemos ir a vivir más, porque pues aquí en lugar de reducir, y pues ya ves que está bien cara la renta, y pues dónde
We don't know which other place we should go because in Redwood City the rent is so expensive.
Y muchos también requisitos nos piden para ir a rentar un apartamento ahora.
And they ask us so many requirements to rent a house in Redwood City.
Es todo, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Vale. Ann Bellows.
Thank you. I'm an attorney with Public Advocates, which is a civil rights law firm and advocacy organization, and I'm here in support of the proposed moratorium. Mobile home parks, including the 8 that would be covered by this moratorium and a subsequent ordinance, provide a crucial supply of affordable housing, as you know, in this increasingly expensive housing market. It's also a secure source of housing in a market that is increasingly unstable and uncertain for low-income families. From a fair housing perspective, Protecting these sources of affordable housing is crucial to addressing racial disparities in housing costs in San Mateo County and maintain a diverse and inclusive community. Many park residents, including those that you've heard here today, are workers that fill working class jobs in San Mateo County. Experience has shown that the loss of affordable housing here will separate these families from this region, this peninsula area, and remove them from their neighbors, churches, schools, and jobs by commutes that reach up to 2 hours. This has really severe health and economic impacts for the families who are affected, and it also worsens environmental harms that this region experiences from the commute times. So we agree that the market forces that have targeted mobile home parks for redevelopment around the region pose an imminent threat to public health and welfare, and we support putting a moratorium in place so that this may be addressed through appropriate legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bellows. Daniel Saver.
Good morning, Madam President, members of the board. My name is Daniel Saver. I'm a housing attorney at Community Legal Services in East Palo Alto, and I'm also here to speak in favor of the proposed moratorium. My first point, I'd really like to commend staff for identifying such a serious potential threat to the affordable housing and to proactively taking this issue on. As the staff report, I think, very adroitly identifies, there's a number of parks that have been closing or where there have been requests for conversion in the areas around us here. And it hasn't yet happened to one of the parks within your jurisdiction, but we can see the writing on the wall. Even here in our own county in Pacifica, as has been mentioned before, there's currently an issue around one of the mobile home parks there that they want to change into a luxury set of mobile home parks. I think it's really fantastic that staff has decided to try and nip this in the bud before we actually have a displacement disaster on our hands with hundreds of families being forced out because of a closure. We're going to actually address this in advance, and I think that's really tremendous that staff has come forward with this, and I urge you to act proactively on this issue while you still can. The second thing that I want to just address briefly is to note the kind of unique character of mobile homes within this county, specifically within your jurisdiction. These are a critical source of affordable and stable housing. The state law puts into place on these mobile homes a kind of comprehensive set of eviction controls that exist for folks who own these mobile homes. And you as a county have already passed a rent stabilization, a rent control ordinance for these mobile homes. You have taken steps already to preserve the affordability of these homes, and I think this moratorium is the next step to ensure the long-term affordability and preservation of these affordable homes. So I urge you to adopt the moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saver. Shirley Gibson.
Good morning, Board. I'm Shirley Gibson, a directing attorney with Legal Aid Society of San Mateo County, bringing up the rear with my colleagues. You have a trio of lawyers here. I have had the great privilege to work with groups of residents and individual residents in many of the mobile home parks that are affected by this proposed moratorium, including Bayshore Villa and Redwood Trailer Village, which have been well represented here today. And I have great respect for the communities within those parks. They are unique and vibrant communities of very interwoven families and individuals. And contrary to the characterization of mobile home parks as mobile, they are probably the least transient of tenant communities I have had the privilege to work with. Many of the families and individuals in these parks have lived there for decades. They've raised their children from infancy to college. They've lived out their retirement years in these parks. And if you contrast that to the broader rental market and the extreme displacement we've seen of lower income communities as it's been on the rise, that is an extraordinary resource worth preserving. It is an irreplaceable type of affordable housing, and while the state law does give you authority to mitigate those harms in the event of a closure on a case-by-case basis. I do not think the value of these stable housing opportunities, these home ownership opportunities, can be overstated. So it is wholly appropriate for you to be focusing on preservation at this time, and as Daniel Saver says, to be proactive about that and get ahead of the problem. Because these are parks that we cannot afford to lose. So I do also applaud the foresight of the staff and of the board of being on top of this, and I urge you to look forward to rigorous displacement mitigation measures in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. Carrie Pang Chen.
Good morning, members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm Carrie Pang Chen. I'm the Associate Director for Rebuilding Together Peninsula, and I know many of you have supported our organization in the past. We believe that everyone deserves a safe and healthy home in our community, and since our primary focus as an organization is to provide free repairs for low-income homeowners and community facilities, we've seen every day personally how this issue has affected the mobile home parks in our community. They, as you've heard, are that vital source of affordable home ownership in our community, and they really do serve that wide range of people in our community, the seniors who have been there for decades, as well as many of the families and hardworking individuals that make up these homes. I think that we as a staff have all been really affected, especially by working closely with the family members at 855 Barron most recently, and working in conjunction with many of the staff at the county departments to look at how we can take a stand in the community and really help these homeowners both to improve conditions of their own homes and the parks that they're living in, and knowing that the board is working with your own staff proactively to take this step. To have this moratorium is essential. The burden that many of these families are carrying, knowing that there's a new park owner for 855 Barron, is a very real concern for them. And so the fact that you all are taking this step, giving yourselves that time to look back at the policies and ensure that we continue to have this vital source of housing in our community is essential. So we thank you for considering this, and we hope you will support it.
Thank you, Ms. Chen. Mary Martinez.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Mary Martinez. I am the Community School Coordinator at Fair Oaks Community School. I am here in support of this ordinance. I just want to emphasize how important it is that this is passed. A lot of our families have already relocated, and I speak to them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and how much this is affecting them, how much of a decision it is that they don't want to make but they have to, and how much it's affecting their kids. And it's very traumatizing for the families. It's very traumatizing for the students as well. So I'm just here just to, like I said, emphasize that just how important it is for this ordinance to get passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Aurora Gallardo.
Good morning. I'm here representing a lot of our families, yes, in Redwood City, but also myself. I'm one living one of these communities. And one of the things that I know that San Mateo County, it's unique because it believes in family and it takes care of the community here in San Mateo County. And I lost my house about 5-6 years ago. And living in one of the communities gave me the opportunity living here, but also helping my children continue college. And so the rent, as you know, in Redwood City, there's no control. And so it will be devastated if we had to close these communities. I call them communities because this is families and children. I work with families that have children under 5, and the social emotional impact that would, impact these kids would be huge. And not only we would have to focus on how to help them socially, so we need to not do this and continue being San Mateo County, the unique county of California. That's all.
Thank you for being here today. That's our last speaker, so we'll close the public hearing.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
What is your pleasure?
Just one question. Is our rent control ordinance pretty effective? Besides, do we... I was asking about the rent. We do have a rent control ordinance. Is that fairly effective as well? Or should we look at that as well?
If I could answer that, John, then you could supplement. We have had for a number of years a rent control ordinance as it related to mobile home parks, as you alluded to, Supervisor. I think there are various aspects of it that could be more effective, and I believe that would be appropriate to look at that as part of this process, and then the legal part of that I'll turn over to John.
Thank you. I think Mr. Maltby has stated it correctly, and in fact we have received guidance from the board, and we're in fact in the process of reviewing the effectiveness of our rent control ordinance, doing a little bit of a gap analysis, and it's our intent to return to you in the near future with a further assessment of things that can be done to ensure that the ordinance is fulsome and that it's being enforced comprehensively.
I was just concerned if we looked at this one part of it, we should look at the other part of the issue as well, same time, or maybe a different time.
Anything else?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Supervisor Slocum.
Just wanted to ask a question which probably can't be answered right now, but I've become aware of. I'm curious about the situation where there's a mobile home park and the people that live there, the families that live there, have been there for a long time, and there's a new owner, theoretically, that comes in, and part of the plan is not to close the mobile home park, but rather to bring in new mobile homes from someplace in the market in California, thereby theoretically upgrading the mobile home park and the mobile homes that are there, and thus displacing the long-time residents of that mobile home park. So it's not a closure, it's not that the property's for sale in any way, but it is changing the nature of what is there. And I'm curious, in our analysis, could we make sure that we cover that sort of a situation?
Thank you. And perhaps my colleague, Ms. Andrikopoulos, will have more to say about it, but my interpretation would be some of what you're describing, or maybe all of what you're describing, would fall under the definition of a conversion, which frankly would be picked up by the urgency ordinance we have in place right now, and certainly with respect to any rules that we might be adopting in the interim period that the urgency ordinance is in effect, would be focusing on those kinds of conversions.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, Supervisor, and I think that's one of the issues. Maybe it gets back to Supervisor Horsley's earlier question. That's something that's just sort of emerging now in this area, and we hadn't anticipated it in our original ordinance a number of years ago. But as a result of what we're seeing in the marketplace now, clearly that's something we'd want to address.
Thank you. I'm ready to make a motion.
Please do.
If the board is so moved. Make a motion that we adopt an interim urgency ordinance establishing a moratorium on the conversion or closure of mobile home parks pending the review and possible adoption of land use regulations applicable to such conversions and closures, and waive the reading of the ordinance in its entirety.
A second.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes. Number 9. Item number 9.
Madam President, members of the board, this particular item is coming forward from District 4, and it is the request to use district-specific funds for a one-time $24,500 grant to Rosalie Rendu as part of a program that would provide English learning skills to residents of the area. We would recommend approval.
Can I just say
Yes,
a word or
please.
two? Thank you, Mr. Maltby. I had an occasion to visit the Rendu Center located in East Palo Alto, and it's an amazing place. I can just tell you that with total certainty. It's basically, you've thought of the chamber is empty.
Holy mackerel.
If you thought that
Is it
was it
something you said?
said?
That was like, whoosh.
if you thought about an apartment building, that would be the right movie to play in your head, but it's much more than just an apartment building. It's really, as one of the speakers said earlier, it's a community of people who have shared interest. And you can just feel it when you're there. It has a wonderful courtyard with flowers and trees. It's really quite a lovely place. But the thing that I was moved by, frankly, was in visiting there, not only Sister T's passion and commitment to the community there, but I actually saw mothers trying to learn English because they were concerned about taking their kids to school and being able to communicate with teachers. They were concerned about learning English to talk to doctors about the health of their children. And there were children there engaged in learning activities, parents there engaged in learning activities, and it was quite an eye-opener for me. They do homework there and any number of things, but it's really an amazing place. And I didn't have the privilege of knowing Sister T before our visit. I had heard of her, but I'd never physically been there, and it was a very moving experience. So when we're ready, I could make a motion to adopt this resolution to authorize a one-time expense of $24,500 grant to Rosalie Rendu Incorporated, and authorize the Director of the Human Services Agency to prepare and execute the grant agreement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes. Item number 10 is a resolution appointing Tom Letta to the Measure A Oversight Committee for a two-year term expiring on June 30th, 2017.
I'll move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. County Manager's Report, number 11.
Madam President, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. Questions for anybody? All right. Item number 12, Board Member Reports. Who wants to begin?
Maybe just to talk a little bit about, I know a number of us have been to Paris, and, when I looked at the number of places that actually, where there was this terrorist attacks, it was, many of us have been in those areas, and it's just hard to understand the barbarity of terrorists. I know when I was in law enforcement, we set up, and I'm glad that we did this, and all the local agencies throughout the whole 9 Bay Area counties have sort of an intelligence center, and there's also a connection with the FBI's Joint Terrorist Task Force. And one of the things that I knew from my experience in law enforcement is that for law enforcement to be successful, they have to stop 100% of events, and for terrorists to be successful, they only have to be successful once. So it's a really very difficult thing to stop. But it's really heartbreaking seeing the tragedy that occurred in Paris, and just hopefully we'll be able to stamp out that kind of activity, or those kinds of terrorist activities in the future. But for now, I think we're going to have to live with heightened security.
Supervisor Tissier?
Just briefly, last Tuesday, November 10th, we had our 28th annual Seniors on the Move with a turnout of about 672 seniors and 62 exhibitors. And one of the greatest things that day was this woman, I think I mentioned going into this, her name is Ann Lorimore. She's 85 years old, and she climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. So I had said when I introduced her that I was whining the night before. It was windy and cold, and I was going to walk my dog around the block. And I felt a little,
You're a wuss.
Exactly. That's exactly the word I used when I was up there too. And so she was very inspirational. It's just absolutely amazing. So we really can do those things on our bucket list, so we put our minds to it. And just one last, the upcoming Age Well Drive Smart Seminar, the last one for the year, is in Daly City on Tuesday, December 1st at the Westlake Community Center at 145 Lake Merced Drive from 9 a.m. to 12.
Okay. Supervisor Pine?
Yes, I have 2 adjourning memories. First, adjourning memory of George Coloris, who passed away on November 6th. He was born in San Francisco and became a resident of San Mateo in 1969. And he worked diligently for many years giving back to the mental health community and was very active as a client advocate in the mental health community. He was supported by Kaminar for 30 years. That was his second home. He was an exceptional member of the community, a loving family member and a friend, and lived a full life in spite of the challenges he faced. So we adjourn his memory today. And then second, I also want to adjourn in memory of Bruce Hassenkamp, who we all know from his work on the appeals board, where he served for many, many years, including in the chairmanship. He grew up in Hillsdale, New Jersey. He went to Dartmouth College, as did I. We kind of had a connection there. Went to Stanford Law School, served in Korea, and in his professional life really had a very varied career. Worked in a law firm in New York, became assistant dean of Stanford Law School. He was the director of the White House Fellowship Program under Presidents Nixon, Ford, and Carter, director of public affairs at Shakely Corporation, vice president of the Asia Foundation. So very, very varied career. And then, of course, he was just an incredibly giving person in the community. In addition to his work on the Assessment and Appeals Board, he was president of the St. Francis Foundation. He served on more than 24 national and statewide boards. Interesting, when he was in Korea, he became really enamored with Korean culture and Korean art. So he put together the biggest Korean collection of ceramics outside of Korea, which is now housed at the University of Michigan. So he and his wife, Inta, were residents for 41 years in Hillsborough, and they're survived by their son Peter and his wife Allison and their 2 children who reside in San Mateo. So he was truly an exceptional man, exceptional citizen of San Mateo County, and we adjourn his memory today.
Thank you. I just wanted to share the fact that last night we had the first Veterans Commission meeting. And it was successful thanks to HSA for really organizing and getting us all together with binders and papers and oaths of office and all those kinds of things. The thing that touched me was the number of veterans from VFWs and other organizations throughout the county that came to pay their respects. I think the commission is an amazing, as Supervisor Horsley knows, it's an amazing assembly of men and women veterans who served this country. And last night, each got 3 or 4 minutes to stand up and introduce and tell their story and why they thought this work was important. And once again, it was just really a touching moment to hear from them. So thanks for the board's support on that matter. And then tomorrow night is Poetry is Autumn. 10 poets will read along with our poet laureate, Carolyn Goodwin. And it's at the Redwood Shores Library starting at 6:30. And I'm sure there'll be some refreshments served. And certainly you're all invited to come and join us for poetry. Thank you.
I wanted to say a word about George Caloris, who frequently attended our Commission on Disability meetings and always had lots to throw into the mix and lots of new ideas, and was a real, I think that between his time at Kaminar and his time helping the Commission on Disability, he continued to fulfill his life. And then on our behalf, on all of our behalf, I attended Mr. Hazenkamp's funeral on Saturday morning and had a chance to speak to his son and thank him for all the work his dad did for this county. Anything else, folks? With that, we're going to 1:30 is service awards, and we're going to adjourn to closed session.
Okay, I'm gonna hold you to that. Clean heat.
Hello, Mr. Byers. Would you please report out from closed session?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. The board met in closed session to consider 5 different items. The board took final action by unanimous vote on 3 of the items, all workers' compensation matters. The first was to settle the matter of Lydia Tay Garcia for the amount of $240,655.79. The second was a agreement to settle the workers' compensation claim of Jocelyn DeClario at $106,849.47. And the final approval was to settle the workers' comp claim of Jennifer Slegers for $34,922.50. That concludes my report.
Thank you. We have service awards at 1:30, and then we're adjourned.